Kochahanada so gizi di traho zando anadi ne ado hashin so ya kodo nahat anzeni do ishja alzeni kodo be anane ne. Our today's topic are first and second lady hosting our human trafficking prevention awareness. Ko Asian kodo hashin so di sani de ne chindatan lini e hashin so na hatlato and na atlo that edge aja pitch na apahiki jo hashin so e de nan lini na tlan hit up and da has e kwa his ishado nito or you a kodo hitchen hata hatzihi da honodo. We have a lot of good speakers. Again, it's human trafficking prevention awareness. We want to welcome each and every one of you to our webinar today, hosted by our Office of the First and Second Lady, Phefelia Nez and Ms. Dottie Lizer. And with that, we're going to go ahead and I opened up with a brief remarks. We have some really great speakers lined up for you today. And before we all get started, we're going to go ahead and open up in prayer. So, Eshen kodo as em nike otlat nazladon hitsodism. Eshen kodo be ananil neto. Koshin yata di nilo so that the dizi. Koden hojondo le shamana hassan. Yadis hissan, twistan. Adokon hayot kalchal his. No de tui. Adoya na dalke na dal tui. Kadadin anis anarebik a hojon. Ni yajin await ni don e kodon to tanadizin. Kashine lago e conche. Nis ishtan il aquije e kodo. Ni hitodizin that it's adon hiyin that it's at Nahadadin dole nasto net nidget. Ado conti the nebakat hahotso has angi. Kashine la e nantinsala. Kashine la in hiyajin he await no tita net ho. Yat eho e kon nanatar yat eho e kodo niki de nepes ishtane iliado le hashin so eya kon de nen lini itel ido bi gahout eya hom banda al dehin hits ant winsen dole kodo e din antin lini gi kon pelho ahiki jono e bikit itado jono e kodo niki de nen lini bes ishtan ilzen ado hashin so eho Sendatan le aro to the zendatan le benit edo besi zido lesnitzen. Aro kon kid nebel hot of a car yat eho nane dado enitzen. Niket aton lane his seat arjet. Naha nahaliado le. Ashine laho one has ango kon hit conta del Klenish Gishnas Kango. Arohon hit tonas kangon his eskenas la yat eho. Barnahi dato le. Aro to cage and leaning kon. Juno ho nada kedo nada ostole nihinanis nihilek enas lani here gun juno ho ba na ho yaro le nasko ne kon saba enjuno e ya ho nane tar e la an sako ben ha na ho yaro le ni kenaden ti ole asa ani juno kon saba e so desen lini kon ba nane shla le aben so it la isla bo isla ben no ni to le stra in lini ho Aro ati den he ben hich hojanasling. At this time, we like to thank each and every one of you for tuning into our webinar, and we like to go ahead and post our agenda for today. And we have our opening remarks and prayers that was set up. We got a welcome address will be given by our First Lady, Phefelia Nez. Shama Ado, Second Lady, our Navajo Nation Second Lady, Dottie Lizer. Following that, we have our human trafficking first speaker, Dr. Sandra Morgan. Then on down the line to our traditional practitioner, Shanella Rexley Jim. We also have Taisha Wood, the sex crimes detective. We also have some presenters for the big picture with our criminal investigation director. And then we also have Jeremiah Barber with the assistant professor from Dine College. And then with him moving forward, we have Jenna Pfeiffer, who's a special investigation out of New Mexico. Then we have Dr. Dominic Rowe. And then also with some closing remarks from our president and vice president of the Navajo Nation. Again, we welcome each and every one of you. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our First Lady, Shama Phefelia Nez, to provide us a welcome address. Mrs. Nez?
Yeah, day and good afternoon. Shaya Hodo, Phefelia Nez initiate Bahanish, Islan Bashish chain, Adona Kaidinite, Dashanalo Dashache, Adotzitlin saw the egg, you see, Nasha. I just want to welcome everybody to this virtual event on human trafficking to bring awareness and prevention to the subject. We have presenters who will be covering what human trafficking is. So by the end of the day, everybody who watches this should know exactly what human trafficking is. And then, of course, we go into topics about prevention, the prosecutions of it, and then, of course, the services provided to anybody who's victimized or survivors of these situations. Human trafficking is a 32 billion a year industry, and it's the most profitable industry, just second to drugs in the United States of America. And when you're talking about free sex, free labor, it's a national, it's a global issue, and tribal communities are not exempt to human trafficking. So I hope a lot of families will watch this video, share it with the children, the information, and that's really the intent of this virtual event. From the office of the First Lady, Second Lady, a lot of you, beginning of this term and even before then, when we went around meeting with different communities all across the Navajo Nation, I always had the stance that I will focus on the home and the family, the home environment, and how crucial that is to our parenting practices and bringing up our children in stable homes and loving environments and nurturing environments. Because as they grow up and they go on in life, a lot of how they grew up and who their parents were, who their guardians were, and just how much interaction they had with them. And just to grow up in a stable environment, it will lead them to good things in life. Whereas the opposite of that, if our children are growing up in places where they don't have stable homes, where they're hopping around from place to place, where not the same people are watching them, where there's no routine in their life, where there's no boundaries set, where there's nobody teaching them about the do's and don'ts in life, that's when we get into trouble. And so when a lot of our presenters, you'll probably cover the different factors, the risk factors that lead into some of these situations. And we know that across the Navajo Nation, we see a lot, it could be a lot of us that fit into those risk factors. So it's really important that this information gets out, that people listen to it. And, one of the things that we want to get at is, just people wanting to know what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about human trafficking. And the other thing that people want to know is how, what should they look for in their own communities? So when you go down to check your mailbox, when you interact with other people within your communities, when you go out into some of the towns of the Navajo Nation, or even into border towns, into universities, what is it? What are some of the signs of these things happening? And then also to who to notify if you want to report something. And then, of course, to go on into the support services that are available to people. So this is really the intent of this virtual seminar. But again, I just want to bring everybody back to just really watching our children, really watching our parenting practices. And when on lady hundishnia, how one has age on here and a mother is at the clinic has how one can hit the widow off halchineba. A con lay nasty do you ha either you a conduct hego de kata and junigo home had asked ego how one do hit the kato I don't want junigo in a ultra at either I don't lay nasty in junigo but has other do bananish a day either other up about chinda has linked the hot ego and junigo dane tin don junigo and yadast hit I don't want junigo yet so that those zindo hot out it's a Junigo hot hour done say do you see con because so that they'll send out up in the content that any get a day. I don't ask shit so there's in the hot egg hot so deals in should has to just know that we pray for you every single day, and that's really ultimately the prayer that I have every single day for all families across the Navajo Nation. And I just want to thank everybody that's presenting throughout the day. Thank you.
Shema ni na isna o kachen ya shita Madam Dottie Lizer, our Navajo Nation Second Lady, Miss Lizer.
Yade she Dottie Lizer Yanisha, Kia Ani Nishla, Mai Dishkiji Bashashin, Vidatni Deshache, Tkachitni Deshanella. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, grandmothers. Good afternoon, sisters. Good afternoon, mothers out there. We are here today to talk about something that's a pretty serious subject, human trafficking. You know, it's a very touchy subject to a lot of us out there. You know, we do have sisters, we do have mothers that are trafficked. So we just need to make sure and love our children, love our mothers, our sisters, our aunties, and, you know, to really take hold and listen to what is about to be presented today. And like I said, it's a very it's a touchy subject, but we're here to just inform you and give you information and to know what to do, where to go, and how to help. You know, if you have a neighbor, if you have somebody that you know is going through some things, you know, the warning signs that we need to look out for. And, you know, and of course, we have a resource page that, you know, will be shown on the website here on YouTube to kind of give you who to contact. You know, we've got public safety and all the Navajo Nation police department numbers. You know, we have the resources out there that can help you with counselors, Division of Social Resources. You know, we have all those phone numbers. You know, Department of Health, we have those phone numbers. You know, and then of course, different agencies that you can reach out to just to speak to somebody, to talk to somebody. You know, because sometimes we just need, you know, to speak to somebody because, you know, of what we're going through, and somebody that we can trust. And so, you know, we just want to be here to give you that, you know, because we're, as First Lady had said, we're all about family. We're all about loving our kids. We're all about loving one another and taking care of one another. And this is where it starts. You know, and to make sure that we take care of our children and, you know, to spread the word of what's happening, you know, to our college students out there that go off to school and spend time away from the parents that, you know, normally don't have that ability to do that when they're in high school. But now they're off on their own. And that's kind of where we have to instill in them what to watch out for, you know, to be aware of. You know, when you're by yourself and late at night, you know, that's one thing that we shouldn't be is by ourselves at night. And so, you know, like I said, we are just here to give you information about human trafficking. And, you know, we love our presenters. They are great people. Dr. Morgan from Vanguard University. You know, we've got Dr. Rex Lee Jim, you know, and we've got Taisha Wood. And we have these great speakers that are here to really bring you what's happening in our nation, within the United States, and what's happening. And so, you know, open your heart, open your mind, and just listen to what they have to say. So thank you for being here today, and thank you for just being able to listen. And
Thank you. Thank you, First and Second Lady. At this time, I'd also like to offer a number for our counselor that is available during this webinar. The number is 928-206-6471. If you feel like you need to speak to a counselor right away regarding human trafficking, or somebody's luring you or tricking you into leaving home or work, please call this number and speak to a counselor, 928-206-6471. 6471. In addition to that, our resource page will also be available at online www.nnoflsl.com. I'll continue sharing that. And moving on, let's go ahead and go with our next speaker. What is human trafficking? And our presenter, Dr. Sandra Morgan, who is the director of the Global Center for Women and Justice out of Vanguard University. Dr. Morgan?
Thank you so much for the invitation to be here with you. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to use some PowerPoint in order to make sure I stay right on target and finish on time. I can talk about this for hours. It is definitely a passion for me. So the Global Center for Women and Justice at Vanguard University is in Costa Mesa, California. And I met First Lady and Second Lady through one of my students, Matthew Holgate, who already put together and hosted a youth conference with our U.S. ambassador on human trafficking last month. And I'm just so impressed with the unified approach to bringing people together, because a community that is aware and educated will be able to protect and prevent the exploitation and abuse of, especially as First Lady discussed, our children. So let me jump into some of the myths about human trafficking. I think one of the most prevalent things I hear is that all human trafficking is sex trafficking. And I want you to look on the screen and see that as a general statistic internationally, 68% of human trafficking is actually for labor. And our young people who are recruited are often offered jobs where they end up not getting paid. Also, we have the sense that victims are waiting to be rescued, and they're like waving, come and get me, and they don't self-identify. And in fact, they often don't even know that someone is looking to help them. The other issue is that people think, well, I know everything that's going on in my community, and this doesn't happen here. But the truth is, everywhere we have human trafficking, validated cases, all across North America, all across every continent, everywhere. And we begin to think about how we can stop this, and the direction to consider society's issues is really important. I always want to emphasize again that sex trafficking is about 22% of the totals, and we want to also be looking for human trafficking in labor and labor exploitation. I am especially concerned right now during COVID that the global epidemic is actually fueling more poverty and more gender discrimination. And a lot of our statistics and our studies show us that when women and children have no resources and no options, they are often the most vulnerable to being recruited. And not just online, but at the neighborhood laundromat, at the post office, someone who wants to make friends and seems to be a trusted member of the community. One campaign that was developed several years ago, Look Beneath the Surface. We sometimes see people that are doing ordinary things like working in a restaurant. And the reason why we see so much more about sex trafficking is because it is illegal to sell sex in most places in North America. But it's not illegal to wash dishes or to wait tables or to clean bathrooms. And so you have to look a little deeper, look for other signs, and I'm going to give you some resources for that as well. Also on this poster, there is a national hotline, 888-3737, 888. So if you're in your own community and you know who to call, that's wonderful. But if you're traveling or you're away on business and you see something, you can still report it to the 888 number. So what is human trafficking? I think it's important to understand the structure and how it's described as a crime. And so this is a basic action, means, purpose. And basically, I'm a nurse. I love being able to diagnose by saying, I need something from this column, something from that one, and something from there. And then I know that's what this is. So this is just a model that helps us keep it in our minds. First, there's an action. Someone is recruited, they're brought and harbored, they're transported, but we don't have to transport across a border for it to be called human trafficking, or they're obtained. And then the means, how does that happen? Through force, fraud, or coercion. And we're going to talk more about what that actually looks like. But ultimately, the purpose is a commercial sex act or labor or services. And one of the most important things to understand about human trafficking is it is a crime of exploitation. Exploitation is a business term. How can you make money by exploiting resources or people? And that is exactly what human trafficking does. These slides, I will send them to Sonia. So anyone who's participating, you can request the slides and you'll have them. The federal human trafficking statutes more clearly define force and fraud and coercion. I think one of the most common things that we see in human trafficking is people are not kidnapped. They're actually lured into this by the promise of a great job or some other recruitment opportunity that would better their lives. And our Department of Labor, Western Regional Director Paul Chang, created a set of indicators that are really helpful for us as everyday people to try to decide whether or not this might rise to the level of a human trafficking crime. And one of the most important aspects is, was there deception about the nature of a job? I lived in Greece for 10 years. One of the first victims that I worked with was a young woman from the former Soviet Union who thought she was coming to work in the tourist industry in Athens, Greece. And instead, when she crossed the border, she was sold to the owner of a massage parlor that was a brothel. Those kinds of recruitment strategies, she didn't understand the risks when she left her country, didn't speak the language, and they paid all of her expenses. So then you see the next stage. Now, debt bondage is often a piece of that story, telling you, well, now you have to work to pay off what you owe. Other strong indicators are threats of violence against the victim or a member of their family. So in the case of the young woman that I worked with in Athens, they told her, if you run away, it's okay, because when you filled out that job application, we have your address and we know all the names of your next of kin, your family, and we will go and get your 8-year-old brother. So she didn't feel she could leave. She could run away, and she didn't need locked doors or chains or ropes. It was the threat against her family. Other indicators of recruitment by abuse include cultural and religious beliefs. And we've seen that happen in several cases where we had victims from Latin America, South America, who someone had cut a piece of their hair and they kept it, and they would use that to show that they had some kind of spiritual control over that person's family. And so they were afraid to run away because it might create a problem for their family. And there's lots of ways where vulnerability results in abuse. Threats against immigration status becomes a huge issue, and not necessarily, especially with our young people. Here I live in a very Hispanic serving community. And so some of our students in the high school were approached by traffickers who said, yes, you have your citizenship, but your uncle doesn't. And if you don't do this, we're going to call the authorities on them. So threats of vulnerability are not always to that person, but to a close family member. Then once they get to the place where they think they're going to be working and someone takes their documents, they make them do things that are criminal, saying, now then, because you did this, the police will put you in jail if you try to leave. Those kinds of indicators of coercion and threats once they start. And they will also not give the person the money that they've earned, their wages. In one particular labor trafficking case where it was domestic servitude here in Orange County, the people who owned the home actually told the victim that we're putting your wages in a savings account for you because you can't open a bank account. Well, there was no bank account, and she was just being used for servitude. Labor trafficking happens in so many different areas around the world, but also right here in North America. We have victims who have been victims of working in nursing homes, elder care facilities, restaurants, street begging, agricultural work, and right here, factory work. So if you buy something that says made in the USA, it doesn't mean that someone wasn't coerced and labor trafficked. I love working with young people. I teach at a university, and we want our students and our families to be aware of what's happening. And one way is to teach them what happens in other places, so that makes them more aware of what can happen right where they are. This is a free app that actually uses the research from our Department of Labor and has, more than 1,000 pages of research. And it shows where products that we buy in our department stores, in our grocery stores, where they actually may have slave labor, trafficked labor, even children. And it increases our awareness and makes us begin to ask questions. And in the latest iteration of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, now our Customs and Border Control can actually stop products that were made by child and forced labor from even entering our country. And that gives it a lot more teeth. And it shows our respect for human dignity anywhere, any place, for anyone. I also want people to understand that child trafficking happens all the time. It's not a rare thing. Shai Mahal was an Egyptian child trafficked to California as a child maid and worked in a $1.6 million home in a gated community. And she actually, with a writer, wrote her story, and it's a scholastic book. And as we want our children to be educated but not traumatized, this was a scholastic book of the year. It's a great book for your middle schoolers or high school kids even to read and do a book report, and it begins to open up opportunities for conversations. I think one of the things I am concerned about in our rural communities these days are the traveling sales crew recruiting. And if you see these, take them down, report them, have them checked out, because most of the time these are not real jobs, and our young people, especially transitional age youth, are especially vulnerable to being recruited into this kind of labor trafficking. I want to talk about child sex trafficking as well. That AMP model doesn't require the middle column if you're under the age of 18, if you're a child. We call it commercial sexual exploitation of children, and CSEC for short. You don't have to prove any force, fraud, or coercion. And I'm going to explain why that is. But first, I want you to use the terminology commercial sexual exploitation, because that term defines it very carefully. Commercial means somebody is doing this for the money. Many interviews with traffickers, sometimes called pimps, have said, the person who was doing it said, I didn't have anything against this girl. This is just how I make my living. So we need to understand that. And to protect our kids, we need to understand what makes them vulnerable. When there is sexual abuse in their community, and we begin to understand that many times that is by someone they know in their community. So how do we protect them better? And if they run away, if they meet someone, and if media glamorizes the sex industry, it is like grooming. So it's very easy for a trafficker to convince a young person to follow them, to come with them, to tell them, I'm in love with you and I'm going to take care of you. Many times the story is like this one, a lover boy pimp, a girl who runs away because of unfortunate circumstances at home and is homeless, and then meets someone who takes care of her. And once he has convinced her that she's his girlfriend, he begins to sell her. And the problem that is prevalent in much of our prevention curriculum is that we just warn people, don't believe him, don't go with him, don't do these things. But I told you, nursing is my first profession. I was a pediatric nurse. So I'm going to show you this picture of a brain, just because, and your brain is not this color, by the way, just because I want you to understand how that girl in that story just now actually was part of making a decision that wasn't a good decision because her brain isn't done. So basically, your prefrontal, the blue part, is where your executive decision making is, where you make risk assessments. And that isn't finished for girls until you're about 20, 21 years old, and for boys, 24 to 26. So we have to find other ways to do prevention with our kids besides just red flags and warnings. We have to develop prevention strategies that are strength-based, developmentally based, because the pimps actually study how to recruit young people, young adults, and they use Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And I won't go into all of this, but I want to introduce this to you, and I want you to understand how intentional the trafficker is. I read an article written by a pimp called How to Be a Pimp Using Maslow's Hierarchy of Human Need to Make the Most Money, which brings us back to this idea that commercial sexual exploitation is about making money. Runaways are often the most easily recruited young people, and our National Center for Missing and Exploited Children averages between 1 in 5 and 1 in 7 every year for missing children that have been recruited by traffickers for commercial sexual exploitation. This slide is here to remind you that you need to learn about how to be safe online as an adult and for your kids. So this, we don't have time today to go into this, but I do want you to look for resources on making sure your kids are internet safe. The hotline that you can call, 888-37-888, and you can show the Be Free text, especially to young people. They're more likely to call. But if something is happening right in front of you, then please call 911. Please call 911. We have lots of resources for you. Matthew Holgate, one of our students who is from the Navajo Nation, has traveled with us, is doing the Anti-Human Trafficking Certificate Program now, and is a leader in our youth mobilization team, Live to Free, and participates in all of our activities. And he is passionate about bringing this message to the youth in the Navajo Nation. We want to invite you to join us at our annual Ensure Justice Conference. Last year, we were all set to have First Lady and Second Lady with us, and then COVID shut down. So this year, we're not going to get shut down. It's going to be all virtual, and there is a special code for the Navajo Nation, and you will be our guests at Ensure Justice. Our theme of being crushed, we partner with the Department of Education here, and we want especially to equip teachers, healthcare workers, community leaders, youth leaders to protect our children who are often the most at risk. We also have as a resource our Ending Human Trafficking podcast. It's totally free, and we'd love to have you access that online. Live to Free. Live to Free is our youth-led, peer-to-peer, youth-empowered mobilization team. They go into schools, and I can't emphasize enough how important that it is for our efforts for prevention to focus on youth leadership. I'm a grandmother. If I go, and I've done it, if I go to a high school, they all nod and roll their eyes because I'm expected to tell them not to do something. It's kind of like telling somebody, your kids to eat their peas or their broccoli, and it goes in one ear and out the other. But at this particular stage in their development, they are very aware of their social network, and they're on all the social media sites. So teaching them to be safe is more effective when it's young people teaching young people empowering young people. And if you are interested in working with Matt in your area, you can send an email to livetofree@vanguard.edu to get more information. We want to be a resource to you. The Global Center for Women and Justice, our theme is study the issues, be a voice, make a difference. If you don't study first, you can say the wrong thing, you can actually do the wrong thing and cause harm. I was reading the Journal of Human Trafficking and just yesterday, and read an article about human trafficking apps that have appeared, nonprofits start them, and the level of misinformation. So we want to be a resource to make sure you have authentic resources, best developed based on evidence-based practices and statistics that can be verified. I am so grateful for the leadership of the First Lady and the Second Lady to have this particular seminar, and I'm anxious to hear from the other speakers. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. A lot of great information, informative. You know, I'm a former educator, and I'm all about empowering one another. And you know, we look forward to getting more information on your just a virtual conference that we'll be joining. And I'm really interested in the hierarchy of needs. And I think that's something that we need to move on. Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. And let's move forward to our next presenter, our Navajo traditional perspective. And thank you for making yourself available, Shanelle. At this time, we'd like to turn it over to our traditional practitioner, Mr. Rexley Jim. Mr. Jim?
Yat e Shanelle. Aro yat e a anotsko. Kwegi. Akil tahwil negi. To nan tindo oho ahbe hi kagi. Shikodosha hol jiji shay the neck etchete ya agan hichakadest. Aro shin laje belagana etchik tahol net ole. A condition belagana bezadgi latoda petrako. Obe chetet latibin ye. Shay dikin le cheat ninchle. Trachi ninchle. Trachi ni bashish chain. Kia ani dashe. Na kreden Shanelle. Senza des ado holje, sedel ton holje kweke hashte. Okoti koto bahaneto ba yasthigi lajigi dan hitne. Eta nan tin salagi eba yasthitole. I introduced myself through my 4 clans, and most of the time people say that's an introduction, but it really isn't an introduction. From the Navajo point of view, when you say which means know yourself through these clans. So you need to have an understanding of your own personal history of your clans. And that's an important one. Kenenzen means, in general, to establish and practice healthy working relationships. So you build a relationship and you work on that. And there are many different ways to do that. In the past, during the river of separation, first man and first woman and the first leaders, they came to a disagreement on who was in charge, who was more powerful, who was more influential, and so on, between first man and first woman. And an argument came out of that. And eventually the outcome of this is they decided to separate. The men move across the river and the women stayed behind. And eventually they came back together because the woman and others were starting to jump into the river because they want to swim across and reunite with their opposite sex or gender partners. But eventually they just end up drowning. But eventually they came back together. But when they were separated, both sides had sexual activities with different objects or different animal parts and so on. And the outcome of that and the eventual different types of naye most people label this monster, but that's an incorrect term. It is more about the dangers of the world, whether they're in the forms of animals, other human beings, or other forces. And these dangerous beings started killing the people. Eventually, I mean, the changing woman was born. The twins were also born, and they were raised with their father, the sun carrier, to obtain knowledge and skills and weapons to learn how to fight, not only with, but to live with the dangers of the world. And those dangers come in the forms like with different illnesses, like in our case, it's COVID-19. But by washing our hand and practicing not social, but physical distancing, and washing our hands, using hand sanitizers and so on, we're learning to live with it. And now that we're coming off the vaccine, that's also part of the weapons that we're receiving from human knowledge and experience and so on. So it's important to understand the concept of that. And so the outcome of this river separation and sexual activities and the birth of the dangerous one is all kinds of human flaws, including human trafficking. It's a concept that's put into practice where we use the nehnikin linigi nahan tahani aron the ayat chunil but nada person hilke hante to na yegishi to ediki ego to yat etati neho. So these the outcome of this revelation, that story, is that a lot of chaos that's taking place. And so when the twin warriors went, that whole story there is about how to live with the dangers of the world, the different forces. And some of those forces, according to Navajo traditions and philosophy, is that one of the most dangerous forces that we don't want to admit is not these monsters or foreign, the alien monsters, whatever, however we label them out there, but that human capacity for evil, that human capacity to exploit one another. In Navajo, we say, in jet ila na mat ila bilkhain jet ila na ho gangi etat ila. It's your own father or your mother, or it's your neighbors. They're the ones that's causing certain things in your lifestyle and home. It's not something that's coming from the other side of the world or anything else, but that human capacity, the ability to tap into those forces and to use it against our own people. That's an element that each and every one of us are capable of. We need to identify, accept it, acknowledge it, and learn to live with it. And how do we train or hashitao eya? Better thought lo akwa has anigi an he. Akiti last dot ke hil ido akil kanit ado cho ebe kahotet enigi e hat khabajna aji khanneto to bedati te okit ash eto nito khajot belatsin to no bezet or etot a ot khato cho question ba hinte akko e digi e hanne banaz lassen dort so sind aber das ende a crocodile ye is chido betrabajna ajonjet ajdo bekedo e al trobe hast hotet edo le ben ta kol zindogi be ke hotet lindogi be natlogi ke na khanilia etlinigi. In order to control this chaos, what was put in place for us are our clans. And that's why we'll always start with our clans. excuse me, when I speak in a public forum, even though most of the people in the audience may already know me, they may already know my clans, I still tell them what my clans are, where I'm coming from, who my grandparents are, and so on. And why do we do that in Navajo? We do that in Navajo, first and foremost, to remind ourselves that we're not an individual, that this is not Rexley Jim as an individual speaking to you, but he is speaking out of a clan, a set of clans, Kintlichini and the group, born for a certain set of clans, etc. So in the end, we're not only speaking out of a clan, but several clans and the clans associated with that. In the end, we're speaking out of a specific place with associated ceremonies and rituals and the plants and animals coming from that point of view. And we're speaking out of a set of people, like specific people like my grandparents, who names, who know languages, know certain ceremonies. And so when we introduce ourselves through these different, we're speaking out of that set of knowledge, that specific physical places, rituals, and ceremonies. So that's when we do that, it's not for more for the other people, but for us to know ourselves through that. So we just don't run out there and say, this is who I am, these are my degrees, and this is what I know, and etc. And that's a way of saying we have connections. And it's through these connections and places that we ensure that the young individual is born into a safe environment, in a welcoming environment. It's a way of teaching our young people, this is who we are, and this is who you are, and you belong here. And we're here to help you. Those people who live behind that hill over there, this is how you relate to them. And through the clan system, it's your grandfather. And the one that over here is your daughter. So we inform one another, and that's how we begin to treat one another. And so that's how we look out after another. I couldn't now. I couldn't now. I could nature. I couldn't now. I couldn't eat. In Mayajet, a queen zag, what aunt hadots, then has tweet and chahatosh kelot. It may not be through the bloodline, the immediate blood family, but through the clanship system. We have uncles and daughters and grandparents all over the place who have permission to get after us. So we're running around out there in the dark. That individual will come and say, you're supposed to be at home, go home. You're not supposed to be hanging low, and so they're related, or you cannot be over there drinking or doing this. You need to go home. But those types of teachings we no longer have because we're so focused on this Western perspective of the nuclear family that we deny our other clan brothers to get after our kids. We're saying, no, stay out. And so it's important to relearn these Navajo concepts of family, Navajo concepts of helping and supporting one another, having the permission through the clanship system to teach people and say, you cannot be running around at night. And there are certain sets of teachings that it's important that we may not be able to get. For example, in Navajo, grandmothers would get after their young granddaughters and say, you cannot be wearing shortcuts in the public. You're asking others for a sexual invitation. You cannot be laying on your back if you're a woman when your brothers or sisters your brothers in the room. If you're a guy, you cannot be laying facing down because they represent certain sexual gestures, and it's inviting incest. There are all types of teachings like that. But today, if you bring that up, they'll say freedom of dressing the way I want, freedom of movement. I will lay it around any way I want. So that individual freedom versus collective wisdom, we need to learn how to work that together. I'm hurt emotionally. No man il ta ha honne ta alswajo. Nene treba hatten ebeni na dobo long tadi kaut an he. Ako hil. Ako go de kessa lani bigid up in the card ka allied hatne akonde. There's also the opposite side of that clanship, kinship. We turn it into abuse. We turn it into favoritism, nepotism, and so on. And neither con poverty, no bahwind in the old seas of the Shadish Atagi and the Rekla. But Heta Honils no Sani Atingo Atlanaja. I don't lady she and for sexual favors, then they're taken to town and getting some food, and then they would take them home. Sexual exploitation. Nana the Hadin Nada is to his son, I'd but not scanded and not the Hadne. Enajan scadder or Tonsit had the skin and I should chain there. Joe Hotat, any Elchine Hatchine, a hot out for you. You don't generally hate the Yanan scadder, but Nana Chiyanka, Nilo, Alchinigi over Chance Lago. In that has to his son, a ship and cyclist, I have a chain that has digi. I got out of Josh. Oh, hey, the Yanat card, the Hojo Hotchina Ilia, Hojo Beck, at Lago Ajedo, than Chongi studied to those individuals. A negot any human trafficking. I gave what the nation belashed in Lingi got out of Josh Ingo. To a no wet or daddy, no AD. To Kade ho Alchin the Bachin da Ilia has two signs of Bachin da Ilia has get I to it and of the nation without kittens now. To that Joel in there to Kade loud a hard that a coco in a way did not the initiation the name without any out of I down old kid like Kodo and net the cushion can there send the bed old canco. The neck how did our baby kitchen Harada Bakan Harada Bakashed out stay all nil. Yinenal Jonta Hota, a home by Yashkit on Sunday down all kid, a condi. Asian had a banahadol, the station Kade Yadi Kade Netaho. A Kodisha the Nekal Shay, Kladoba National, the now who served the Institute. No, Edit he had it and go net Atlati Bahas, Center for Navajo Ceremonies and Healing will yell. A Kone 80 Combahil Negi, a Yego be. That didn't need either kid they need it out or need no. A coalition by now hold Jesus Ibn Khan that office of the first lady and second lady. It's not a key regulation. Has your back wheel net or left on it, age kid Hana Anita. They don't just stand on the start of Ashin has state or less another when you knock a got here.
Ik heb Chanel, John his now sings net door or you go on ni na biki at hit door kadate era ashin sato and he cut anadi was benahataros and that he but trana or John he nini kid or less nasty Ako aro kwashit na hoy naro hota an let in nashit zon ya di aje zes inji yeta annehi it ya asti aje sat hipasata e bicho hojil na e nast e na kitepi alo na kitnas pas has ti to sit asla. If you feel like you're going through this trafficking, we have a counselor that is available on site right now and on this call, which is at 928-206-6471. And if you want to call the hotline, it's 888-373-7888. Thank you. And let's move on to our next speaker at this time regarding the topic of sex trafficking in Indian country awareness. Taisha Wood, our former sex crimes detective. Taisha?
Thank you. Yat Eshe Taisha Wood Nashia, Twotsoni Nishle, Betla Jenabashichin, Hashkana Tokni Dashache, Betahni Dashanella. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and share my experience of being a detective in human trafficking. My background is in law enforcement. For 17 years, I was a detective with the state of Arizona, and I worked with 3 tribes. Of those 17 years, 12 of those years were dedicated to the sex crimes unit, where I investigated crimes against children, and I also investigated domestic violence crimes. Sometimes the crimes involved adults who were sexually assaulted. Our unit handled those types of crimes as well. So about 4.5 years ago, I was assigned a case that was labeled child abuse. When I read the details of the case, I realized that this report was actually made 2 weeks prior. So 2 weeks prior, there was an anonymous reporter who said that a female minor was being auctioned on Facebook Live in exchange for drugs. So again, this is 2 weeks prior. So when I'm reading the case, and it's labeled child abuse, and I'm reading the details, and I realize that this in fact is child abuse, but it also has distinct elements of sex trafficking. When I read the case, I realize that the victim in this incident, the child who was being auctioned on Facebook Live, was in the Department of Corrections Juvenile Detention Center. The suspect, who was arrested on drug charges, had since been released with charges pending. And my witness wanted to remain anonymous, so I had no witness to call and get an interview from. I was able to speak with the victim, and she's 15 years old. And again, she's had been detained in DOC. And this was because the law at that time for that community was that habitual runaways, once they're located, they go to jail. Laws are different in each community, in each state. So for this particular community that I worked in, she had been arrested. I was able to bring her out of custody and speak with her. So one of the first questions I asked was, "Do you know why I'm speaking with you today?" And her response was, "I heard something about human trafficking." Now I stopped there and I thought about it, and I realized that this young woman knew a lot more than she led to believe just by that answer. Nowhere at any time did anyone say anything about human trafficking. We had talked about it within the unit, but I didn't tell DOC that I had a human trafficking case. I didn't tell the prosecutors, nobody at this time, that I believe that these were elements of human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking. So for her to respond and say, "I think this is human trafficking related," really sets a red flag, like, okay, this girl knows what she's involved in. But the most dangerous aspect of this answer was the fact that she knew how to answer this question. So any other follow-up by questions I asked, she knew exactly how to respond to law enforcement. So this, again, shows that she knows what she's being involved in, but she also will protect the fact that she's being exploited. I was able to follow up on a few other leads on this case, but ultimately the worst case scenario occurred for me. And in all my years of detective work, this case really hit hard because I failed. I failed this victim. I failed to protect her. I failed to bring the suspect to custody regarding the exploitation of this child. And from this lesson, these are the things that I've learned in which we are going to talk about today. One, I identified that there was a lack of awareness that sex trafficking was happening in this tribal community. There was a lack of awareness that families knew how to respond. There was a lack of awareness that law enforcement also failed to respond effectively. There was a lack of awareness for laws. If I were to take this to trial, and there were no specific laws to protect this child from sex trafficking. From this time, and I made all these realizations that it does not have to be this way. We don't have to have these victims slip through the cracks. We don't have to have this young girl put in a situation where she feels like she has to protect the people that were doing this to her. And that basically went on a different level. If we look at her story, she was a runaway and she was living with her boyfriend's family. The boyfriend's uncle was the one who in fact had put her on Facebook Live. So if you look at that aspect, she was protecting her family because they were her caregivers. Dr. Morgan talked a lot about the conflicts that involve sex trafficking and in labor trafficking. And there are so many, and she's right, we could talk about this all day long. There are so many different levels to discuss. Identifying, awareness, prosecution, the laws of the community that protect these victims, and service providers. What are we providing the victims when something like this happens? There's so many different tenets of this, but what I'm going to talk about is the fact that bringing it all back down to step one, the awareness. This community, even myself as a detective, there was a lack of awareness and training for these types of crimes. From that time, I realized that it's really not just the responsibility of law enforcement to pursue these types of crimes. What it really comes down to is, what are we teaching our children? What conversations are happening in our homes to protect ourselves, to protect our children? Because it's not just a crime against females, it's a crime against children. Males are just as susceptible as females. Women are just as susceptible as males. Adults even. We are all sometimes put in these situations that not very many people understand, where we are stuck with traffickers. So going back, these types of crimes, these types of incidents that are being reported, even some that aren't even believed, this basically has gone on too far. This has gone on too far long for us. So let's start bringing it back home to protect ourselves, to protect our community. And how do we do that? Like I said, we bring in the conversations into our home. We need to create dialogue on healthy and unhealthy sexual relationships. We need to create dialogue on how to speak with others when we feel like we're put in an uncomfortable situation. You know, telling our family that it's okay to tell someone, no, I don't like this. It's about telling our kids, yes, awareness is important about what's in the family, but really when you go outside, do you know where you are? If you were to tell somebody your location, do you know how to explain where you are? Do you know what your sister or your younger brother is wearing today? You as parents, if you were to describe what your children are wearing, can you do that? It's simple conversations on that level, but if you want to start talking about sex, yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. You know, a lot of us, our generation, these conversations were not had in our homes. You know, there's a lot of, in some cultures, there's a lot of conflict with talking about bad things, because there's an idea that you bring those bad things into your home once you start talking about it. Yes, we have to have respect, but also it's time to break the cycle. It's time to break the cycle and start taking on responsibilities to protect ourselves and our children. After dialogue is happening in the home, then how do we create that dialogue with our communities? It's not just what's in our homes, but okay, let's talk about let's have these conversations even with our elders. Sometimes a lot of our grandparents have custody of our young children. How does that dialogue happen? How do we explain to our elders that these types of crimes are happening? Could this be something that community looks at? Could we start doing awareness projects within our community? Yes. Let's start talking, putting it on the agenda and at chapter meetings. Let's have our chapter officials sit in on these types of trainings, these awareness trainings. Is this something that we should start talking about in schools? I say yes. I say teachers need this type of education. I say bus drivers need this type of sex trafficking awareness. Let's start the programs within our communities. Dr. Morgan shared a lot of resources, and there's going to be resources on the attachments to this webinar. There are curriculum out there for teachers. There are education for toddlers, for children, to talk about human trafficking and sex trafficking awareness. It's really about how much you want to invest in your family, protect them, but making that effort to find these resources. There's a lot of resources out there. Now, I failed my victim of this particular incident, and I've made it kind of a purpose in my life to make sure that this doesn't happen again, because it doesn't have to be this way. You know, but it's really coming back down to an individual responsibility. How much can you do to protect your child? How much can you do to protect yourself? I can't stress enough that our communities can create the future that we want to see. And that is protecting the children in our communities, that is protecting ourselves, that is resources. There's been a lot of stories shared, and there are some other stories that need to be shared from victims themselves, because I understand that teenagers, they think they know everything, right? We were there once, but how do we get teenagers to listen to us about, you know, the what's happening to other people? It's inviting these survivors into the conversation, because there are some people that want to talk. And sometimes we and ourselves, when we look at these definitions and this terminology and hearing these stories, we realize maybe we ourselves were put in a position and we didn't realize it was sex trafficking. And I think it's very important to talk about it. And I'm really glad that the conversation that we're having is happening, but also that there's resources out there. Dr. Fowler has been mentioning the number in case you want to talk. It is there for you. There are people that are willing to help you. I see that my time is about up. So I wanted again to thank you for the time. If you can take anything from my conversation, it's awareness, it's acceptance. It's realizing the responsibility that we have to learn more about sex trafficking in Indian country and understand that it is happening, and to be aware. Thank you.
Yeah, Janon, it's Haiti. I have a theme in 2021. A story not shared is a wasted story. So thank you for sharing your story. We know that we all got to get creative and become innovative in sharing our resources. A couple of safety tips: be aware of your surroundings, lock your doors, never travel alone, stay connected with your people periodically, let people know where you're going, your whereabouts, inform someone if you feel like you are in danger. And then here are some warning signs. And if you notice of an individual that's kind of withdrawn from family, it appears to be fearful. And maybe another sign could be an individual having a whole lot of tattoos, names, numbers, different symbols on his or her body. Somebody that's probably going through some type of substance abuse or addiction. I always say we have some certain kind of addiction. If you feel like you're in danger right now, we have an available counselor that is available online. The number is 928-206-6471, or you may call the hotline that is available, 888-373-7888. Thank you, and let's move on to our next speakers. We have 3 speakers in this section. They're going to provide a bigger picture within the Navajo Nation. I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Henderson, who is our Criminal Investigator Director, Alrena Nakai, our Community Involvement Specialist, and Dr. Michelle Branster, she's a Delegated Health Service Administrator with Department of Health. We'll go ahead and go in that order, and we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Michael Henderson. Shiash Nahoji. Thank you.
Shady touchy, neither my dishkies neighbors chin. Todich eat neither should che. The never salavish and dashness got cutting over and cut over on Nache. Kade koje the Alcaz Anje, but see in Schlen. Oh, here. Hakoshidon nido kwe and trato leshidon nidigi. Kodo Abohone Anigit Ashe Shilto Hodoni Hodish Ash. Di kwe Bahwind Enigi Human Trafficking. Oh, Bahas that's da the Quishi Way not Dina Hida that's it. It not Bahas that's Selaf Soja Yen Dutton Tin Lego. Sure, did up. The Nedant in has ala. The Islatino Kayaka Hotzo be it all. Torn under none now. None nations on. Abakaha is seed. And the Dago Ananago. Bakaha is seed. Da Nilego had a yen that tin lego bar on easy down. The never nahas, the never key of a kai. Hard she a cohort idly edon Sunday down. A codibinacha hashne. Din da il kako. Jo yam. Atahonish because Ani the Holodo Kita Ilton because Ani Kita Yiti Nana Sache because Ani begin the nest Dizgi after the Yosh Asago down Hina Nishabane Kredit Edi Benina Hon Nishigi criminology is no. Di because Ani Kita Yiti do. Because Ani begin on this desire that Yosh Agi. It's a little bit I will longer. It's in Janoya has nay. These laws are jod up. Edi tra poverty. Ado unemployment law. In the inequitable distribution of wealth. Racism, psychopathology, genetics, youth, broken families, decline in moral values, poor education, substance abuse, Di tlahidan lobinina. A kohon nil. And need the conscious yet yasne. Na ye as at up. As that na the hush benina. Could oh ya na ye has lee. Jano ya johana need. Adi kahakohot. Vilaganik as you go root causes of crime, Juishne. At Latin law, a cat all long. Deep in now, without any horny. Aro deep in that wheel necky. Jo yam the Nike up a cargo quiet none has to be ye. Jo the poverty, I don't unemployment, ye that haggy, ye need it now, wishna. Page and the how ye now. Bit Latin law, jo de Hessian basically eat or leeching. The Cadiz eat or you not yen he eat or loco. Joe down his has quite sure. Go. The question on now then shaw. The question now long. The quite without being not sladolish. Nigo ya eat or loco has بالنحجة هاشين إذا بنزنيت إيش إيدوليش بنجل نشتات دوليش نهودا زنا نشاكو دو تونسو دا زبني بالنحجة بيسو دوليش نهو كو دوليش جديد أهز آرو إند تادي الشني يجنو سالن لنجي بنسكيست عندي تادي تودكو بيا إيدوت لكو Die kommer bedst chi bedst da huilne. Even the kaje, ja I dort loko be baza. The question halchin hot out. Le he shinte kidanaj jade. Ad. Khishi be ja I loko. Ado kodo in ya yo dort musto adi. Beshta honne no. يا يطلعوا عادن كده ولا جو هتحجي نيل كاغباني خي آرو إند تادي أهون هز آجي شاك أدو هجو مش بيه هزنو مش بيه هزن ده كون دكوا مش هوني تويجو الشني يجي ياندو تونس آريا ناستوزو كوا شو هاد إلى بتنله نانا هيدشني بالنحجة تاهد أو إياد ناسو شوكيل إيدوليش كونغ بيسو تكويلانزن ديد أو يجي هدوتي بدأني الكال بدأني الحز أوده خيشي أمادو أجاء الشندو هواندني دونش الشني يجد أيه هسني بالتأدات زيت إيدوليش إيدو تاكو دي خد أوشين كاكو يالك إني دونش دي آجو بأشك إني نله أو تلاغو سهاياغو آده كدونيش جو هد أوني الكا هد أوني الحز أو بأكو نيتزن خد إيه يا خد أو إيه بيك إيه هدو الدوش جوان كون دكويغو شين تكيش دا ويستاشتو إيه دي التهيي إيه كواه punishment بلاتسين دو نشلون لا والي هادي هادو التيش آدو كون إيه socialization ناني ديتنا إيه ناحي نيتين أكون الشني يجد أبن داحي نتينغو هدو يو داحي سان جنو جو هتهيي بجنا ليا بجد شون وهد أغلو نهيكا أندول وش هد أغلو آرو كون opportunity reduction نابدينا Bebich that the doll kashi. Jadi akut an sekhes do hat a benanish ich inigi. Dort it ego ya in sekhes do dort it ego yahast det a. Allanja hast hat the liago. Jo hat a ton binache peso ido lishda yet. It no ich the nay the no ich chiniyaji the no ich. Heshi the no ich. In the heat out, you hot out a banet and over yelty. Eddie in the even Nashabeho Nils and got the Kojets allow it, Lenigi. D in the had in ye and the had ishin then lishi no ish. Eddie had ishin then lishi as cave is zoko. Had ishi anahund engi. Anahund and the note eshigi to a Ikades aro adonan klein laho. Haj with the hodol nish. Arod adonan klei bahon tigo. In the doll yes. Aro hans to shield. On the hoshi doll hans to chose either. Jot egi kades Criminologists, honda no, yada hasne. Thieves steal things that are craved. Thieves, they look for things that are concealable, removable, available, valuable, enjoyable, disposable. Those are the kind of things that thieves look for. In human trafficking, individuals are no different that are in that business. They are thieves. They steal human beings. They look for those human beings that are easily concealable, easily removable, easily available to them, that are valuable, to an extent enjoyable and disposable. So how do we prevent that? In addition to socialization, in addition to punishment, we need to reduce the opportunity for these thieves to remove our people. We need to make it difficult for them to remove our people. We need to make it difficult for them. The availability of our people to them. And a lot of, at the top of the list seems to be teaching and learning, especially for our youths, the dangers of social networking and educating each other in the household and educating each other in our communities, educating each other even in the punishment area, educating and further training our police officers on what to look for beyond the reports of child abuse, beyond the reports of sexual abuse, beyond the reports of elder abuse. What's on the surface? What else is there underneath the reporting? To that extent, I just wanted to share that real quickly and in the time frame that we're allowed it. And I thank you for inviting me again. And I hope that the collaboration between our Navajo Police Department and our other divisions under the Navajo tribe, and also with our communities and our households, hopefully, and we can do better in this new year and years to come.
Yeah, Alarina Nakai with Community Involvement Specialist, Division of Social Service. Ms. Nakai. If Miss Nakai is, are you available? Oh, there you go.
I'm here. Yes, I am. Good afternoon. My name is Ellerina Nakai. I'm the Community Involvement Specialist with the Family Harmony Program under Division of Social Services. Ado kilichini shno tachini bashishin hashlishne dashichedo toadline edashinale. And I work under the Family Harmony Program, is a domestic violence program that has been in existence longer than I've been here. I've been with as a community involvement specialist for 21 years, and I've done presentations that pertain to domestic violence, child abuse, child neglect, domestic violence effects on children, a whole lot. But within the last 3-4 years, human trafficking has been on the agenda for us as community involvement specialists. There's 3 of us. One is Elaine King from Crown Point, and a Gloria Yazzie with Fort Defiant Social Services. And we do the presentations pertaining to these subjects. So with our program, formerly it was the Family Violence Prevention and Services Program under Division of Social Services. And then it moved and it was separated into its own program as a Strengthening Families Program. And then last year it moved back to Division of Social Services, and with the Department of Family Services, there they named it the Family Harmony Program. Under there we have 3 components. We have the prevention, where the community involvement specialist does all these presentations. Like I said, we did add human trafficking to our presentations, along with all the other presentations that we have, where we do cover these subjects. Before the pandemic, we were getting on our way with going out in the communities at chapter houses, at health fairs, programs that were inviting us to do presentations, along with radio station. We were getting radio time under the Strengthening Families Program with the Gallup KJAK office. They gave us a 2-hour live remote that we did, forum that we did to cover each time we went to go on the radio, we covered different subjects. So we did cover human trafficking, and the Strengthening Families Program was starting to hold meetings with Medicine Men's Hatati Association and different individuals and programs, how to provide some appropriate, I guess, culturally sensitive presentations and things like that. And we were getting started, but it didn't, and then everything changed. So we kind of don't have maybe an appropriate, or we just went different ways of doing a presentation into the human trafficking. It's not is what the name that came up with, and that's what we were calling it, and how we do it include it in our presentation. So the Family Harmony Program primarily is a domestic violence program, and we do have 1 shelter in progress and 1 and it's open with the Sherbrooke Northern Treehouse. And then the next portion to that is victim advocates. We have victim advocates that do assist, do transport, that can help from filling out a protection order to helping, help explain to the victim how to fill out that protection order, and in that sense. And then the portion where the CIS comes in is the prevention part. So it has 3 components, and I know that the website doesn't provide a lot of information but it was changing right before the pandemic. So hopefully, I noticed that a lot of people have come and gone. So eventually, I'm sure all that information will be on there. But for right now, with the Shubrok Northern Treehouse, we really don't have a confirmed human trafficking victim that came through. We know, we've heard, there's stories out there, but not one that is actually confirmed. So right now, for myself, speaking for me, the community involvement specialist with the Shubrok Department of Family Services, I've redone most of my presentations and learning how to do Zoom and learning how to use the internet and getting updated in that part to do more. I have so far I've done with this today is the third Zoom presentation that I've done, and it's quite interesting in how it's going along. But when we talk about human trafficking, I know there are a lot of stories out there, a lot of prevention, and I did see your resource page, and it's very updated. It's got a lot of information. I do travel a lot by myself, but I'm always calling home, calling my granddaughter. I'm on my way home. I'm right here now, just calling home. And then after the story that I heard or saw on the Gallup Independent, where a lady was dragged from her vehicle and they stole her vehicle at the Walmart parking lot, as women today, I think we're not fully aware of what's out there. We can't just be casual or whatever attitude and just go walking. It doesn't matter how old you are, that these human traffickers are looking for people that they can use. And I always say, when my grandkids or my daughter, my children tell me, Mom, be careful. I said, they're not looking for a 50-over-year-old woman, but you never know. They might steal your purse, they might steal your vehicle. That's how we can become victims. And our children, how do we teach our children? It has to come from us as grandparents, as mothers, as fathers, as aunties, uncles. It's our job to talk to our children. As young as they are, I had a grandson who just learned how to potty train. And he was so happy that he was wearing his underwear and not a diaper. And he showed me, and I said, come here, Shiaj. And he came over and I said, Yaj, you don't do this. You don't show anybody, your underwear. I said, don't do that. And then talk to him a little bit more. And I said, do you understand? And he said, yes. And the very next day, he stopped saying it. He wasn't showing off that he was wearing his underwear and stuff. And, sometimes as parents or as grandparents, we think, they're so young, they don't understand, but we have to step back and look at this is my grandson. This is who I'm talking to. The same with if I'm talking to my granddaughter, Shiaja Hakko. Come here, honey, I want to talk to you. Is it okay to talk to you, Shiaja? And we sit down and we talk, even with our spouse. How do I think when we talk about human trafficking, what is the awareness? What is the prevention? I say communication has to be the number one with our children, with our grandchildren. What is your child on? Have you checked the internet? Have you talked to their friends? Who are they talking to? Are you not allowing them to be on all these internet sites, hashtag, TikTok, so many things of how the internet can be misused. So I say communication and awareness are the two things that we need the most. And thank you for inviting me, and I do appreciate it.
Yeah, Ms. Nakai, thank you for your words. At this time, we'll move forward to our next speaker in the bigger picture, Dr. Michelle Branster. You have the floor.
Oh, yeah, this is Michelle Branzer. Hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Michelle.
All right. There we go. Okay, well, yeah, Michelle Branzer in this year. My clans nashed Aja Nishla, Tobajni Ajibashashin, but a Chini Rashache and Kia Ani Dashinale. So I just want to thank you for having me here. I am the Delegated Health Services Administrator here for the Division of Behavioral and Mental Health Services. And as part of the bigger picture, I just wanted to share, our programs more. And, COVID definitely has challenged us, listening to the other presenters as well, to make sure we're getting out the information and the counseling and the services within our programs. So I don't know if some of you have seen these nice, see if we can show it, nice brochures we have had printed in the past, and I believe there's still some, but if there's, I saw resources earlier in the chat, so I'll see if we can't put that in there here shortly as part of the resources. So some of you may know we have 12 substance abuse and co-occurring, which means substance abuse and mental health at stabilized treatment centers throughout Navajo and through all our agencies. And what we've done with COVID is have to do a lot of our services over the phone. We are working on having telehealth, which is the video conferencing calls to be coming shortly. So hopefully that will come soon, because I know the phone has been able to help us stay with our clients or get new folks that want to receive services into treatment. But I wanted to let you know these are the main offices. If you don't know already, we have office in Crown Point, in Gallup, and Shiprock. It's called the Navajo Regional Behavioral Health Center in Shiprock. And then also with that is a sub office in Red Mesa, Arizona. And then our other Arizona offices are in Chinle, Dilcon, Fort Defiance, Kaibito, Kayenta, Newlands, and Tuba City. And in some of these offices, we do have the Navajo Regional Behavioral Health Authority, or the TREBA, you may know them as, that assist with the services through Access or Arizona Medicaid. And so as you may know or may not know, we provide behavioral health resources and treatment, education. And as we were hearing all of our speakers before, trafficking is a very challenging issue in today's society. As you heard, it's not just what you think with sex trafficking, but it's other areas. And some of our vulnerable populations, we talked about the youth, but also those that are abusing substances, drugs or alcohol, or other types of addictive behavior. Could be through the internet. You heard some of that as well, or places where youth or adults may even gather. So with that, we do understand that, and with our resources within DBMHS, or Division of Behavioral Mental Health Services, we do want to continue to work with our population, because we know if they're reaching out for help, let's just say at that time, we do want to do what we can to provide those services. If it's outpatient counseling, or through their assessment, say that residential treatment is needed, which is usually, off reservation right now due to COVID. The residential facility that we do have is currently getting renovated, and once that is get done, we'll have our residential services being opened again on Navajo, and that's in Shiprock at the Navajo Regional Behavioral Health Center, or NARBIC, we call it in general. So typically, we do ask for certain documentations for someone to receive services, but again, we do have crisis response teams. So if someone is in a crisis, maybe through the trafficking topic we're talking about today, or any other crisis maybe related to COVID or other things, then we'll go ahead and, again, I can post that resource if you haven't seen it already on the Department of Health or Division of Behavioral Mental Health Services. We do have crisis lines as well that you can talk to someone or a counselor and just see how we can help in that way. And so that's kind of the bigger picture for us, is really providing our services, though we know really limited in the sense of crisis response is still occurring. It's just that we're not maybe going into the home more readily. We used to do that in the past, is go into the home. However, there are some people in the community that do know our workers, DBMHS workers, and can communicate freely if there's people there that are in crisis maybe more frequently, that we'll do our best to interact and make sure that we get them connected to the right services. But we do know with the pandemic as well, the bigger picture, that many of our folks are still abusing substances or going into border towns and, putting themselves at risk. Some of the weather, like here in Winter Rock today, and where I came from at Tobahuizgana or near Nanajojigo, is cold right now and crazy weather sometimes. So, we do want to help our people, but we do know that a lot of times if they're in this addiction or, in this lifestyle, let's just say, then, they're putting themselves at risk for a lot of other things like we just talked about, those high indicators that were mentioned earlier. And so with besides the crisis response, we're really working on partnering with our 638, our IHS programs, because we work with substance use disorder within behavioral health here in our treatment centers. And that's what majority of our counselors are licensed to do, but we do have some mental health licensed counselors. But typically, we do also work with the ENA counseling or the IHS mental health counseling agencies, due to the fact is that's where the psychologists, the psychiatrists, other mental health counselors are available and really can help. Let's say someone is in a big crisis and they need hospitalization for mental health reasons, maybe suicide or other self-harm type of behavior, then we will make sure that they can get to the hospital and be evaluated there, and then hopefully get connected back with their resources once they get back home, or if they need other kind of treatment services that can be kind of linked in there as well. So overall, I would just like to say, we do want to make sure we're meeting the needs of our people. Though, like I said, the pandemic has kind of made it a little more challenging, but we are utilizing all our resources, and I appreciate the time to share about our programs. And please visit our website. It's the Division of Behavioral and Mental Health Services, kind of long. It's with Navajo, and there are some resources pages linked in there. Also on the Navajo Department of Health, there is some other resources as well. And right now I'm working with the Mental Health Task Force. And so you'll probably see coming out another resource kind of directory / kind of what to do when someone's in a crisis situation. And I'll be getting that finalized here shortly. And then hopefully that can get disseminated all throughout Navajo, and it will have all the more numbers that are needed. And then people can reach out that way as well. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Branster, thank you. We do have some resources, Division of Social Service, Family Harmony Program, 928-871-6556. Ajadi Chinabada Bahayanja Ajabich Foundation a nas a naki tepi ado tepi tosted asla hastra ashla hastra ado di kodon need a Dr. Benster yan nahol na Aj as in a yego it's easier that I need only hatsiga na raj aji da anihi Aj ya nas a naki tepi tosted asla Astrana Kitty Donas Bus Shinquadilne, the Department of Health, Behavioral and Mental Health Service 928-871-6240. If you feel like you or someone you know is being trafficked and you want to speak to a counselor right away, please call this number 928-206-6471. A counselor is available, or you can reach the hotline number at 888-373-7888. A couple more safety tips. If you could please know your whereabouts, know where your children are. Be proactive. Aro ishi yisicho inigi ananja. Aron le belt leda bent ladata. A call dan chill and late chide baike betranalt ehida ananja nayat ado hashin sagadin hashin cheat ya baha needs no nadi nishikedo shidne. So moving on, we aj na hol jide kanich hanana zi ADA Jeremiah Barber will ye le couldn't the next college to ajishe khal khado hananish just instilling hope in the light of loss. Jeremiah Barber, you are up next. You're available.
Oh, alrighty. This works. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Alrighty. So I guess we'll begin. So again, my name is Jeremiah Barber. Originally, I'm actually from Shiprock, but I live in Round Rock, Tennessee. So overall, I am the assistant professor here at Dine College. And one of the things that we'll be looking at is kind of that element of looking at the areas of human trafficking, but we'll kind of come from, hopefully I don't want to kind of re-educate about the same thing over and over again. But again, it's one of those things where I'm just going to kind of share from my experiences. So I'm going to do a screen share. So we'll kind of go from there. So you'll have my voice to kind of guide you as we're going along. So let me put it into slideshow. So hopefully everybody's good, right? Everybody's on the same page with me, I hope. Thumbs up if you are. If not, then okay. So again, we'll be looking at instilling hope in light of loss. And so within that, one of the biggest uniquenesses is 84% of Americans within their lives. So within that, we know that one, individuals on the Navajo Nation, we see those various traumas, we see those various individuals kind of having those various impacts. So again, when I teach, that's one of the things we're always looking at. We're looking at the aspects of, what things can you notice? Within that, our focus here at Dine College has been the Missing, Murdered, and Dine Relatives Initiative. So overall, our main focus has been trying to bring about closure, not so much closure in terms of primarily looking at the elements of family loss related to missing and murdered. We're looking at the aspect of individuals who have been trafficked. So within that, we know that individuals, when a person has lost a loved one due to human trafficking or due to the aspect of going missing, in that one, their ability to cope and their ability to understand where their loved one has gone missing, initially there's that initial hole. So again, our focus has been to try to see what avenues have we not explored in terms of bringing that element of hope and peace. So again, factors that impact decision-making. One of the biggest things we're always looking at, and again, my background has been in the area of domestic violence and sexual assaults. So within that, one of the biggest things we come across is the elements of physical abuse. So within that, we have emotional and psychological abuse, we have sexual abuse, we have spiritual abuse, we have technological abuse, financial abuse, and familial abuse. So again, one of the biggest key factors has always been to empower individuals who have been victimized. Within that, living on the Navajo Nation, we know that housing and homelessness is a huge, huge issue. The reason why I say that is when I worked as a counselor, behavior intervention counselor, one of the biggest things that I came across was homelessness in regards to children. And so one of the things is when we look at the aspects of care and we think, everybody is connected. And we like to use that. We like to use, whether it's the first of the month, whether it's at various elements. But one of the biggest things is when actually happens, when we're actually needing that assistance, a lot of times the ability to lean on somebody goes out the window. And again, a lot of times when you look at homelessness, a lot of individuals that are homeless, and the reason why I say that is when you look at children and when you look at the aspects, again, what do we mean by homelessness? When I worked in the field, one of the biggest things is you have families that are living in initially mobile homes and living in hogans, but you have 4 or 5 families all living in that small setting. And so when that happens, what happens? And that's where it leads to extreme poverty. That's where you have also the aspect of substance abuse within the home. And then you also have the aspect of age and naivety. One of the big things is most individuals that I've met in the field, initially their education life and also their ability to understand what is happening around them is not necessarily implemented. Again, because one, say for example, they left school at a young age or they started a family at a young age. And so within that, it impacts their ability to see a better life. And then also the aspect of desiring for a better life. So again, when you look at the aspect of human trafficking, you look at the aspect of labor trades, you look at the aspect of even sex trafficking, a lot of times individuals are having to go into this other avenue to initially provide for that family. And the reason why I say that is, even as I noted, a lot of times you have families that initially are struggling. Say, for example, you have mom or dad who's addicted to alcohol or addicted to methamphetamine or addicted to various substances. And when that's happening, a lot of times you have the children who are looking and saying, okay, I'm noticing these things. I'm noticing what's happening. I'm noticing the various key impacts. But in order for me to make a change, I am going to do this and the other to try to provide maybe, say, for example, a better life for myself as well as for my younger siblings. And that's when they get caught up into a unique life. And then you also have the lack of direction and input, whether by parents or even the self. And then you also have the aspect of rurality of help and resources. Because as we know, I think that's one of the biggest things we always come across is we always talk about, they need to go here, they need to go there, they need to go to these locations. And for my time working with a small program in Chinle, call it Dottie, Amadola Chinabuan Incorporated, but now it's Dottie, it's a healing shelter. So again, one of the things that we came across was the aspect of offering that level of assistance. And so again, in program, one of the main focus has been to even reach out to the locations, to reach out within the Chinle agency to help get resources to those locations. Because again, we can say that they're there, but the reality is a lot of times having to get to those locations, a lot of times are harder. So again, moving forward. So again, what makes manipulation coercion easy? One of the biggest things is for individuals, and again, we talked about it, and I think a lot of my fellow individuals that have talked before me have talked about the aspect of playing on emotions. And so it's vulnerability. Because one of the biggest things is the next slide will kind of go into that. The grooming signs, targeting and hunting, looking for vulnerabilities, trust building, in other words, manipulation. Opportunistic assistance. In other words, they notice a need that a person's going through. Therefore, they say, if I provide this for you initially, you'll get the assistance, but also, I'll get this in the other hand. So again, these are the grooming signs. And then also the limited and controlled seclusion. So initially isolation, you're isolating the individual. And that's one of the biggest key components that I've come across in working with individuals who've been either human trafficked or who've even suspected aspects of human trafficking. You have individuals who are initially isolated. And even on the Navajo Nation, you have families that are living farther and farther apart, which then makes it a viable opportunity for most individuals who are initially implementing this level of violence. Then you also have the continued dominance and coercion. So what does this all mean then? So one, here's a little, so again, I'll be going through the next slide. So the next slide kind of just breaks it down. You have the various aspects through Deliver Fund. Again, I love this website. It kind of breaks it down in terms of the aspects of what the grooming behaviors are. And then also the next slide over. And so what does this lead to? So again, we have poor health and abnormal behavior. So again, you're looking at the fearful and anxious aspects. You're looking at depression, you're looking at submissive, and you're looking at the nervous and the paranoia. And then you also aspects of unusual fear. In other words, there's a hypervigilance. And so within that, you have these for individuals. And again, this kind of goes across the spectrum in terms of working with children all the way into adulthood. So again, when you have all these different features, what does that mean though? Because as you're looking at individuals, your students, we're looking at the counseling aspect. We're also looking at the aspect of looking, say, for example, some of my students are going into education, so they're going to have to notice some of these things. And so as they're noticing it, what does that mean, though? Does that mean that they're all automatically, being trafficked or being abused? Again, that's where you're looking at these warning signs. And then you have the physical aspect. You have the shows poor signs of hygiene, malnourishment. Again, shows signs of physical and or sexual abuse. One of the biggest things is noticing, and I guess I would say that these are the main components in terms of working with individuals, is understanding what is initially happening. Because a lot of times we can educate, but again, that's what we're looking at is what are the warning signs? What things are happening? What things am I noticing? Am I noticing my own child becoming more withdrawn? And even in today's day and age, we talk about all these different apps. We talk about TikTok. We talk about Instagram. You talk about even the calculator apps. You talk about all these. But one of the biggest components that I always talk about is the elements of something that we've all bought. I think it was at the beginning of the year. The new PS5s came out, the new Xbox 10s came out. And so when these things came out, what did we do? Most of us as parents and most of us as grandparents, what we did is we went out and bought the devices, but we also realized that we had to buy what? Internet. We had to buy all these different additional elements to make sure that the software was working and running and everything else. And so when that happened, what did we do? We opened up a whole slew of uniquenesses into our own homes. And so one of the biggest things I'm always a big proponent of is, one, making sure that you're being aware of even your own children. Oh, 3 more minutes. Okay. So one of the biggest things you're always looking at is being aware. And as I educate, one of the biggest things I'm always looking at is making sure that we're aware of these uniquenesses that are happening in our own homes. So safety planning, what does that mean? So within that, what is the intended focus of a safety plan? So for me, one of the biggest things I'm always doing is laying out safety plans for a lot of individuals, whether it's looking at the environment, whether it's looking and educating yourself about, even our good old cell phones here. A lot of times we carry them around, religiously. One of the biggest things is making sure that we're consistently connected. And as we connect, we want to make sure that we identify the safe friends and safe places. And one of the things I always look at is the element of the survivor. The survivor knows best. Because one, that individual will know what they're doing to initially survive. But as we're looking at the aspects of hope, what does that mean? One, we're saying, okay, we're leaving the choice up to you to leave a situation like that. And like we were talking about earlier, one of the individuals were talking about those features as well. We're saying, okay, we want you to search for help. But in addition to that, I'm here. And as I'm here, I will try to help you as we're going along. And that's one of the biggest things we're always looking at. So here we have a listing of various elements that I always try to educate in regards to individuals who've been abused and everything else. I always talk about saving evidence. We look at order of protection. And this even goes into the area of familial order of protections as well against family members. And again, a lot of times, a lot of individuals don't realize that you can do that. But one of the things I'm always looking at is the aspects of safety. So, survive and continue. So again, save all the pictures. If you need to leave or get away, again, one of the biggest things is knowing where to go. a lot of individuals, when you get caught up in the emotionality and everything else, there's a high level of stress. And so within that, one of the biggest components has been always to ensure that the individual is going to another safe location. So leaving a human trafficking situation, again, on the Navajo Nation, one of the biggest elements that I always talk about is ensuring you know where you're at. Because a lot of times we'd like to call 911, and I talked about this before, where individuals, when you call 911, say for example, if I'm in Saley, or if I'm in Many Farms, or if I'm in Rock Point, if I'm in Rock Point and I call 911, what's the nearest dispatch is in Shiprock. And so as time progresses, one of the biggest things I'm always a big proponent of is ensuring that you know your local police phone, police station's number, so that you're able to contact them and so that you have a direct line to them. So on Navajo Nation, one of the biggest things is, and because I work so much in Chinle, I have that 2111 memorized, 2112. And again, with my son, tell him the same thing. You have to know these numbers. And also knowing the landmarks. Because again, when you're escaping, you want to make sure that you're getting out of that situation safely. So overall, there are additional information as well. I wish I could get to all of them. Again, one of the biggest things I'm always a big proponent of is prepping. I'm a big believer in prep work and everything else. So within that, if you have any questions, I will scroll all the way to the last slide. Where am I at? Okay. If you have any questions, let's see, as I'm skipping. So here's the last slide. So this is the one, if you have any direct questions, just direct to me at jbarber@dinecollege.edu. This PowerPoint, I do believe, is available to Sonia. So again, one of the biggest things is if you have any questions, you can also get the slide and everything else. It's all there. It's all available. Again, I'm a big believer in educating. And so I believe that's safe. Stay positive. And yeah, that's it for
Ado kodon ki ishtani in line by heta nitzen. Ado shi na adikidigi na bidesh kisto but kilkodesh nit no sonche kwa abijit bakado a Dine College ginger nishlako here shiash. And moving forward, again, thank you. I'm doing my best in keeping everybody on track. If you have any questions, a lot of our slides will be available through Sonia. Again, if you feel like you or somebody you know is being trafficked, we have a hotline number, 888-373-7888. Okay, moving forward, next we have Ms. Jenna Pfeiffer with the Special Investigation Human Trafficking Unit out of New Mexico, Attorney General. Following her, each of them will get 15 minutes. Dr. Dominic Rowe Sipowicz with ASU Associate Professor. Jenna, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for having me. Let me just set up to share my screen.
I think that first person needs to.
Yeah, I think Jeremiah.
Put the screen away first, Jeremiah. Tanya, can you assist us with this, please?
We got it.
Okay.
Oh, there it goes. Never mind. He's still sharing.
Okay, Jeff, go ahead. Thank you.
Sorry, it's, oh, there it goes. Okay, great. I'm so glad to be here. First of all, I just would like to thank all of the speakers before me and listening as I was working to your presentation and just the knowledge you have to share. I think working in this field for the past 4 years, I feel like I always gain a different perspective, and I'm always appreciative of just the amount of work that each and every one of us puts in, and I'm grateful to make new relations today with Sonia and her team and everybody else. First of all, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Jana Pfeiffer. I work with the New Mexico Office for the Attorney General, the Human Trafficking Unit, Special Investigations Division. And I'm just so excited to present this, small 15-minute presentation talking about the Human Trafficking Task Force. I also do co-chair the task force as well. And so this is pretty much a general overview talking about the task force. We are a grant co-partnered with the Attorney General's office. We're the holders of the grant, and our main partner is the LifeLink, and also the New Mexico Dreams Center, and then FBI, HSI, Homeland Security, Investigations, and then our other partner is the U.S. Attorney's Office, and of course, other key important stakeholders as well. The task force is a collaborative effort between law enforcement and service providers to combat human trafficking statewide here in the state of New Mexico, but also within our tribal communities. Some of the three main elements that we want to tackle as a task force is talking about prevention, which is enhancing our public awareness and providing some technical assistance to many of our key stakeholders, which is important to us. Prosecution, we do have an amazing prosecutors who are dedicated to all of the investigations that some of our offenders eventually get arrested and prosecuted and tried by our prosecutors. So it's a really amazing collaboration with our agency. And then protection, which is our victim-centered resources and services and our long-term care as well. And that's where mainly, where LifeLink comes in, which is our main partner as well. So this is just a mission and vision for the Human Trafficking Task Force. The mission of the New Mexico Human Trafficking Task Force is to combat human trafficking through a seamless collaboration between law enforcement and service providers with the use of victim-centered approaches and proactively investigating and prosecuting human trafficking cases and providing comprehensive, high-quality services to all victims of human trafficking in the state of New Mexico. The New Mexico Human Trafficking Task Force envisions a swift and coordinated criminal justice response to human trafficking in which perpetrators are held accountable, in which the rights of victims of trafficking under the New Mexico state and federal laws are protected. The task force aims to provide a comprehensive network of high-quality services for victims of trafficking and a systemic collaboration between service providers, sorry, I have to move my screen around, and law enforcement towards the common goal of combating human trafficking in our state. And this is just a general overview of the amount of MOUs that we have with our key state partners. And I was thinking about it yesterday when Sonia, asked for me to present on the task force, and I also had a chance to present to the New Mexico MMIW task force too. And I think that the model that our Attorney General has on Human Trafficking Task Force is something to be shared and to collaborate with tribal agencies as well. So I do hope that some of the leaders that are part of this panel and presentation, and especially our community members, can see that a task force definitely, can meet a lot of the community victim and frontline service providers' needs, and really just bridging that collaboration together. So this is just showing how we work with different service providers, our victim services, working to identify the victims. We want to make sure they have, proper legal and social services once they are identified. And generally, I'm the individual that can help assist with that. When I used to work directly with victims of sex trafficking on the streets when I was at First Nations Community Health Source. And so I did that about 3 years before I came here to the Attorney General's office. So my firsthand knowledge of working with a really wide range of specific detailed resources and services for victims was really interesting. So I kind of have that understanding of, like, once a victim is identified by our special agents, I can quickly link them to services. Training is pretty important for us because we definitely receive notification tips from community members. And so providing technical assistance to tribal agencies and community members is just as important as them helping our task force as well. Law enforcement, the Attorney General's office is considered law enforcement or special agents are definitely accredited law enforcement officers with years of expertise, and some of them have specialized in human trafficking. So it's really unique to see just how, the Attorney General's office level of understanding in their integrative wraparound approach to when a victim is identified is pretty amazing. Awareness events as well. We definitely hold upcoming awareness events throughout the year, and we're always looking to partner with some of our NGOs as well. That's very important that we provide that type of collaboration as well. And then basically talking about our protocols too, creating and evaluating protocols or the task force and the procedure for handling human trafficking situation. One example is my former employment at First Nations Community House Source. I had a lot of training on basically identifying victims in the clinic and understanding that, that does require a really good collaboration with your nurses, your medical providers, and really understanding like what are the healthcare consequences of the victims that are identified as well. And so protocol is really important, whether you're working, someone had mentioned like calling, if you are a victim or you identify somebody, that protocol, that process, sometimes even just living on the Navajo reservation can be, hard to understand versus like living here in the city, you call 911, you either get the Albuquerque police or the state police in terms of that. So protocol is really important for many of our task force members to understand as well. And we're always looking to update that. So this is just a brief overview of our human trafficking unit. I'm considered in the human trafficking unit. And then we also work side by side with the Internet Crimes Against Children. And I've heard a few people talk about social media, and I definitely have to agree that within the past year, it's been really difficult to see the number of notification tips that come on the ICAC unit side. And some of our special agents, because of how we've been so inundated with some of those tips, our special agents in the human trafficking agent enforcement agencies, tribal as well. We have 3 special agents on the ICAC side, 3 special agents in the human trafficking, 1 criminal analysis, 2 forensic examiners, 2 administrative specialist coordinators, 1 mental health professional, and 1 electronic detection canine dog, and then a mobile forensic lab. And this is actually Special Agent Joey. He's our canine detection dog. And so pretty much when we do our search warrants operation on a home, during our operations, sometimes some of the perpetrators will actually try to hide their laptops or their USB in the wall or in the attic or in the basement. And so basically Joey, we just let him go and he can go throughout the house and sniff out every electronic laptop, anything down to even just a USB or a cell phone. So I like to, when I see there were, a review of our units, it's really amazing how when a case comes to us and it could have small little identifiers, a phone number or an email or a name, we have some really amazing experts that can extract a lot of information out of just basic, simple information. And so anything regarding, exploitation on the internet, our special agents are really good at tracking who uploaded those, obtaining search warrants for many of their email information, things like that. So it's really amazing how the AG's office can investigate some of these cases. I think since coming on to the task force, the last day of 2019 in December, it's pretty much been like my mission as a Navajo woman myself to make sure that we understand the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls issue, and bringing that attention within our office is just as important as the numbers that come in with identifying certain victims as well. And so if we look at our investigation cases with our partners, our key stakeholders, we want to make sure that they understand MMIW issues, reviewing notification tips, internet crimes against children. And one of our main partner is First Nations Community House Source as well, and then addressing MMIW at our task force, and that's through training and education. So I receive all the notification tips, whether it is from the Missing and Exploited Children's, the National Center, and then the Polaris Project, which is the National Human Trafficking Resource Center, CYFD, and then 505 Get Freeze is our state hotline. So in 2020, we received 382. Their internet crimes against children, this is the most we have received, 1,933. So they've definitely gone up. This, when I first got on in 2019, this was the first operation I did, which was Jordan Padilla. And it's a pretty scary case, how this individual, how he was able to upload child pornography. When an individual does that, it's almost like a NCMEC does this like quick notification that this individual, this user uploaded this image of a child, your office needs to review this. So when we get the notification, we quickly begin our investigations on them, and this is one of them. Another example, with this individual, a longtime foster parent from Albuquerque who agreed to trade drugs and money for sex with who we believe to be a 13-year-old girl, was sentenced to 8 years in prison. So these are just a few of the criminal statutes. Of course, you can contact our office. If you have any simple questions, I can definitely refer you to the right individuals. If you're a prosecutor or a law enforcement officer. And these are just some of our numbers for 2020. Some of them are low because we still haven't completed our Bureau of Justice report for September to December. These are just a few statistics we have for 2020. Just in our office, we've had a total of 24 cases that we investigated. So some of the challenges we see is just some law enforcement participation, collaboration, and coordination, some double reporting, training, and needing assistance with educational outreach, lack of services for domestic minor sex trafficking victims, and working with our tribal communities. And so these are just a few upcoming projects and initiatives that we're doing. We're always willing to help assist with letter of supports with tribal communities. We did do one with the Pueblo of Tusuki. They received a huge grant initiative for sex trafficking services in their community. Human trafficking training, we always need assistance with that. MDTs, that's our upcoming project with the Attorney General's office, working with the United States Attorney General's office on MMIW. I know they did have an individual that's specifically hired for the MMIW position, and then World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, and then our new partner with New Mexico Dream Center, Shelley Rep. So this is my contact information if you have any questions, and I'm so glad that the New Mexico Attorney General's Office Human Trafficking Task Force can be a resource to you. So please email or contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Ado hashil tsaganan nishintli ba ahen sin shizazido do ani takodo tagaho zando ikeha wa abel soit ashi ad nihit a cancel cage can lini beka anandlo ba hensin. Thank you for your resources, and very informative. and أتقابل والخنا ناقص ناشي نهالا الشن نتخا أو يوصان يسوي له أكو thank you. And moving forward, I'd like to introduce Dr. Dominic Rose Sepowitz. I hope I said that right. With our Arizona State University Associate Professor, ASU Office of Sex Trafficking Intervention Research. Dr. Dominic,
great.
Go ahead.
Can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes, we can, and yes, we see your screen.
Wonderful. With me, I bring Sergeant Mark Dottie, who is with the Phoenix Police Department Human Exploitation Unit, and he'll tell you about him. I also with me have Yolanda Old Coyote, who is a new staff in my research office at ASU, who we're very lucky to have and is going to be working with me on some of our projects. So I'm here today to tell you just for a quick moment about the ASU Office of Sex Trafficking Intervention Research and a little bit of the work that we're doing with the Arizona Governor's Office Human Trafficking Council. First, I would like to thank all of you for being here and for listening, for being interested in this topic and being willing to kind of open your hearts and minds about how to look at information. And I think you've heard a lot of different voices, and I think you'll hear that we've moved quite a bit in the last few years, and I have some research to present to you. So some of the work that we're doing is also inclusive of missing and murdered Indigenous persons with the Navajo Nation Missing Persons Initiative. We're working with police departments to try to be helpful and learn about how investigations work and how to be strategic and data-driven. We work with different social service agencies, trying to help them build up a foundation of knowledge of all of their staff so that they can intervene with victims in a way that's very helpful. So we have lots of different work that we do. Mark, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and then we can go into this project.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me today. My name is Mark Dottie. I'm a sergeant with the Phoenix Police Department Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit. I've been supervising this unit for a little over 4 years now. I was a vice detective back in the mid-90s. Been in this work for a little over 27 years now. Dominic, did you want me to go into the collaborative or what do you want?
Let me move the, okay, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay, so the police department got involved with the collaborative back in about 2017. It was in the spring of 2017. And what we had noticed was that there was an issue with the recovery of our victims of child sex trafficking. What we had noticed was we were picking up the kids, recovering them, and they were going back to the same group home or same placement that they were in, and they were just running. So no services were being provided. Nobody was talking with them. There was no contact at all. And at the same time, the governor's office was questioning services also being provided to the victims in a timely manner. So we put our heads together and we, my partner in crime, Lisa Lucchese with Mercy Care, we basically, how can we affect this or how can we make this a little bit better? And so Mercy Care at that time had 12 beds, if you would, at a closed behavioral health services center at St. Luke's Hospital. And what it did is it gave us the ability to recover a child and place the child at this, it's called OSCA, the Observation Services for Children and Adolescents. So that unit is a lockdown unit and it will hold the child for anywhere from 20 to 23 hours. During that 20 to 23 hours, there are 2 assessments that are done with that victim. There's the to find out if there's self-harm to themselves or others, as well as a screening tool that was provided to them to identify if there's possibility if the victim was trafficked. So that is done during the time period there. So once we recover the child, we'll take them to OSCA, which gives us the time to find proper placement for the child. And what I mean by proper placement, it's a placement center that knows how to deal with the specific trauma that our victims see and that have gone through. So It also helps us because there's different categories to the levels of our victims. Whether they're a bottom, they're just somebody taken right off the streets, they have some kind of knowledge of it, or they're just they have no knowledge at all. It allows us to put those victims in a place where they're not going to be targeted again. So we provided training to certain areas or the certain placement centers to give them that knowledge and the understanding of what to look for and how to interact with some of our victims, because it's a specific group. They have their own trauma. They have a lot of trauma, and dealing with it a lot of times is multifaceted. Once you become part of the collaborative, the unique thing about it is all services are provided to or taken to that victim. So no longer does the victim have to be transported out to go see a doctor somewhere else or transported to go see their therapist somewhere. So everything is taken to that child. So it also prevents the child from running, because now we don't give them that opportunity. Going through it, Dominique?
Sorry, I just started moving around.
That's okay. And so trying to figure where I'm at now. So
sorry. So can you talk a little bit about the transportation that you have, that you do, and why that's important?
Yeah, so we learned early on that transportation is a big thing for law enforcement. The kids, for some reason, they have a tendency to run if DCS is trying to transport, or if they're trying to transport in some other way. You can't just order them up or Uber or anything like that and expect them to get where they're going to go. DCS also has limitations on how they can transport and if they can hold on to a child or not. So what we found was, in the best interest of that child, us being Phoenix Police Department, we will pick up that child and transport them to OSCA for the observation. But in turn, we will also pick up that child once they're done with the 20 to 23 hours and get them to their placement center. So it prevents them from running, because for some reason, they don't run from us. We show up in plain clothes. We're in our undercover vehicles. We treat them with respect. We go buy them McDonald's, whatever. We have the conversations with them, because one thing we're also trying to do is we want to be there, but we also want them to be with us to prosecute against their traffickers. And building that rapport from the beginning assists us in doing that. And so that's a key component for law enforcement, is to try to do those transports and build that rapport.
So the way that the collaborative works is that the victim is identified by a number of different agencies, including law enforcement, but sometimes it's a social service agency, sometimes it's a DCS worker, and they bring that client to Mercy Care, the specialist, who's Lisa Lucchese, and she goes and investigates whether or not this is a victim of trafficking. If she does find that they are a victim of child sex trafficking, they go into the collaborative. If they are not, they are given kind of services as usual. They are identified as a victim of trafficking, then that coordinated care begins, and they are either returned to their parent, but along with that, they're getting their medical needs assessed. They may go to OSCA. They're assigned a survivor mentor. They're going to be access to trauma-focused sex trafficking therapy that my office does some training on. They may go to a specially developed residential treatment program that is just for kids with trafficking history. They may go to a group home that has the background and the training. And so the goal is that every service they receive, including their CASAs, for example, are well trained on how to work with them. We also have a court in our community called the Strength Calendar, and there are specially trained judges that work with them. So I want to tell you a little bit about this study. I'm going to skip over some of it because we're going to run out of time. So what we did was, I'm just a researcher, helpful. I work in our community. I do trainings. I'm a nice clinician. And this is really Mark and Lisa Lucchese's baby. This is their project. And what I did was I got the data and put it together and made this nice report. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and then we'll come back at the end with some of the recommendations. So this was 3 years worth of child sex trafficking data that went through the collaborative. Again, the collaborative was developed partially because the Arizona Governor's Council said we have to do something different, and this is innovative, and this is a new way to try to get all these systems to work together. So We have 3 years worth of data. It's just a little bit of data on each client, but it's pretty interesting. So we looked at the date that they were referred, how old they were, did they run away, anything we could learn about them from the data that was collected, runaway history, how many kids saw a survivor mentor, and really want to base our decisions in the future about this project on this data. So, excuse me. One of the things that we used to think was that kids in Maricopa County that were being trafficked were from other places. And what we found is over the 3 years, only 4 of the child sex trafficking victims identified were from other states. That's important for us because we do have interstate compacts and other ways to communicate that, but that is not a key element of our work. That the kids that are being trafficked in our community that we're able to see are ones that are in our community, and that's where their homes are, that's where their child welfare workers are. It is homegrown, our own homegrown problems. This is how the data fell out. We had 16 the first year and 107 the last year. We had only a couple of months in the first year. We're not sure why each of those years, the way that the data came through, we couldn't really figure out any distribution reasons, and we still don't. Interestingly, we have, and unfortunately, we've seen the age drop of the victims. Let me go back for one quick second. There were 291 kids. That is 6 school bus loads full of children in just Maricopa County that were trafficked during those 3 years. I want you to think about that 6 school bus size problem that we have. It's really easy, I think, for me to just sort of rattle off the numbers. But when you really think of how big that problem is, that's a big consideration that we really need to do some different things to solve this. We're seeing the average age drop from in 2017, it was 16.6. We're seeing it drop to 15.3. As we think about our prevention and the things that we're doing, we need to really address that. We found that the vast majority of our victims were female. This is forward facing. These are ones that are being referred. We know that there are male and transgender persons being trafficked as children. We just don't see them, which really means we have to pay better attention and do different training. The ethnicity of what we saw, we had 9 Native Americans. This is relevant to this presentation. Consistently over the years, we have more African American young people in this collaborative than it's always more African Americans, so something for us to learn. The guardianship of the children has changed. It used to be all a Department of Child Safety. And so you can see over time, it started at almost 94% and ended this past year at 60%. That means that our services for families need to really ramp up. Parents need to know what to do. Guardians need to know what to do. Big disparity. We currently don't have any services in Arizona for parents of children who are trafficked, and we really need to do some work. Where did the referrals come from? It's really been interesting because we've seen some shifts. Originally, it was especially year 2, we saw some DCS and law enforcement, and now we're seeing some shift that it's more and more from behavioral health organizations because we've trained all of the people working in them to look for this type of victim. Crisis beds use, this was the OSCA program. They used 104 of the victims used those beds. That's fantastic, 35%. We've seen the survivor mentor involvement, about 70 of the kids, certainly not enough. Only 24% were able to have a survivor mentor. That's really important and something, again, to keep thinking about. The history of running away has become a really important conversation, that what we found consistently was these kids are very likely to run away. And this is a flag that needs to be not just in our child welfare system or our juvenile correction system, but all of the units working with runaways, missing children have to be paying attention to this. We saw that 27% reported a history of childhood sexual abuse. These are some of the ways that children were sex trafficked using electronics and technology. We think this is helpful and interesting. One last thing is that the importance of COVID-19, we compared the March to October when we had the data from 2019, March to October in 2020, and certainly COVID-19 is not finished. This is just the data that we had, and we had a 29% increase over that time. So making more work, more and more cases, it certainly hasn't lightened up or kids haven't found more safety during this time. Really important, and the runaway comparisons are very clear. So we know kids are more online, they're more accessible to traffickers to find them. They're lonelier, looking for people to connect with. We know, again, that the kids were more likely to be from Arizona. There's a steady decrease of age. Those changes in guardianship are important. We know that the referral sources are changing over time, and that there's a link to runaway history. We only had the data that we had. We only had the data on the 291 kids. We do know that we've trained, between Mark and Lisa and a bunch of other organizations in Maricopa County, we've trained about 12,000 people during the time of the collaborative, and that has really changed things in our community. And we can only speak to the helpfulness and engagement of the people that we have trained. And so our recommendations are that we start prevention younger. We now know that the age is dropping, and we need to really focus on younger kids, that we're seeing a lot of turnover in all of the agencies that work with those kids, and we have to keep up with our training and keep them informed. We need to hire more survivor mentors, and we need to work, we need to screen our kids a little bit better. That's something we're working on with juvenile probation right now. And the last point is that we want to be able to support the families of these victims in new ways. That 40% of victims in 2020, we want to have support groups and system navigation guides. There are our contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Whew. Yep. 4 minutes over. Sorry, it's literally impossible. I try so hard.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Rose Sepowitz, and then Mr. Dottie. Thank you very much to both of you out of ASU. And, you know, with all the information, formative information that is shared, you know, a lot of things that I'm getting from the overall is how can we prevent human trafficking? And it's all to us, each individual. It's time to get involved and go against human trafficking. That's the bottom line here. Again, if you or someone you know is being trafficked at this time, you need to speak to a counselor, or you know of someone that needs to speak to a counselor. We do have a counselor that is available online right now, 928-206-6471, or the hotline at 888-373-7888. Kodo hashin sa kanhisin tahas na agye enihido bichahat ot zehido shichahat ot zehn zinishito snehin zini atla ajiye enihi kwa apesh bahna ayi gahyasta bichahateshne ashbesnateshne hinzio bichahatilne enast ena kitsepi adona kitnaspas hastran ti tosted asha ajhatilne Nana Sachako hotline will Yenny Ki Ajaquation Hinzino Eya Tepi Tra Tostet Tra Anonana Tostet Ado Tepi Aj a hotline. We want you to continue joining us. At this time, we're up to the closing remarks and closing prayer by our President, Honorable President Jonathan Nez, for closing remark. Mr. President.
Yes, there's Dr. Fowler. Kdo Nika Nanzwa do Kdo na Nishin La Beach by here Nitsin Kdo Nikain Hidna Ba Haya Do Shindo Ba Da Williago. Naso ne nje nije o iltoni hina antin abol tra jogot a esa nije kodalia diche ado kon hikedi hina aron hikiston lenigi hana nije kodai lagi edo a he na kabedini do les diche. I want to thank everyone for their contribution to the Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness webinar. Dr. Fowler, thank you for being the facilitator of this discussion and translating into our Navajo language. You know, there are terms that we are very careful of when we do translation from English to Navajo, because you know, it could trigger trauma within our elders and our Navajo speakers. And we are doing our very best to develop our own Navajo dictionary, because some of these terms are very new. And our goal is to bring our people to back from the trauma and into balance with life. And first and second ladies, thank you so much. I know the first lady mentioned today, having a stable environment. I know that for some, that's not the case, but I think the community and the public, if they see something out of the ordinary, I think it is up to us to also let folks know that our relative needs some assistance. And First Lady also mentioned the children, setting boundaries and teaching right and wrong. I know there's no perfect parent out there. And sometimes children do make their own decisions, And sometimes as parents, we allow them to make those decisions and learn from their mistakes. And I appreciate my parents doing that to me. I learned the hard way, but you do learn from your mistakes to make you stronger in the long run. But I'm saying that at times we do have to intervene so that some of these problems don't get out of control. A teaching of right and wrong, as the First Lady mentioned today. Parenting practice, there's no book that you can read to be a perfect parent. But I think it's improving from one generation to the next. You as a child, seeing your parents and how they raised you sets the tone for you when you become a parent, how you're going to raise your children. And we're hopeful that it will be in a positive way to teach them about what's important in life. The second lady mentioned the resources that are available. All the individuals who spoke today, we appreciate it. Dr. Sandra Morgan, former Vice President Rexley Jim, Taisha Wood, Michael Henderson, appreciate his presentation in the Navajo language. Alarena Nakhe, Dr. Jill Jim. Was very interesting to hear Jeremiah Barber's presentation, as well as Jana Pfeiffer and Dr. Dominique Sepowitz. Thank you for sharing with your colleague. And thank you as well, Vice President, for your leadership, Vice President Meyer Leiser, and helping our citizens out there. And, we've been saying since we got elected in the office that it's up to us, we can offer and try to facilitate some discussions and also bring resources to the table. But we would really, let me turn this off, I'm sorry. Sharing those resources with you so that we can empower our citizens out there to make those decisions for themselves and for their community members. Human trafficking is a concern for Navajo and all tribes across the nation. And, former Vice President Rexley Jim presentation about human trafficking is not new to Navajo. You go back hundreds of years ago, and it was there between tribes. And how do we learn from that, utilizing our way of life? I guess that's the reason why we come together today to share resources and taking care of one another, as the second lady said, and focusing really on the family. You know, we've been talking a lot about mental health lately. You can say behavioral and mental health. I think there is a mental health crisis happening in our country right now. And with COVID-19, it has magnified that more so. And you saw that a couple of weeks ago at the nation's capital. You know, what we put into our minds affects what we do. And social media and the internet, the media out there fuels those different perceptions. And if you hear it over and over, right, just like mom and dad, you know, reminded us all the time. But if you hear something over and over, or you're engulfed in it in a periodic basis, you know, you begin to believe it. And I think with human trafficking, that is also happening throughout this country, where there's a network and they're engulfed in that type of thinking. And until we raise awareness, you know, it will stop. We want it to stop. And I think really, again, that's what the discussion we're having today. And I want to thank the first and second ladies for their leadership in taking on this, you know, this topic, this crisis. It's not just about human trafficking or missing and murdered Indigenous women and children, but it's about the mental health or our well-being. And that's where some of our teaching comes back, our way of life teaching. So daisunol tsagi aita e konke diot au e ke she yazu where she kissen lila she na she tsile she je she ma she ta e na antine di chimpida hilza she kero shuna tashin kon khas chinda okta biya da ho atante Nihin khasula ani tso alla ani tao alla ani tsno. Jo atta ani tle amaya jenitle a che jo kebego kodo be hastigi aita hishi bedan shnido benan shle jo atta e nan tinasity. You know, utilizing the clan system, it already has a connection with those that have similar clans, to have that healthy and safe working relationship. And, you know, you learn a lot. You know, you can't just tease one another when you're talking with each other using clans. You know, you can tease your brother, yes, but there's also some respect that also is the foundation of kinship. And I truly believe that our way of life teaching holds a lot. I know we get over-schooled, if you don't mind me saying that, learning concepts off our nation and getting degrees. That's helpful, yes, but we also need to incorporate the teaching that has been handed down from generation to generation and combining that to make sure that our families are healthy. And when families are healthy, you know, that is what pushes back on human trafficking, missing people, and many other social problems that are happening in our communities. But overall, we are wanting to have Dine College and Navajo Technical University be the leaders in these types of initiatives, utilizing our professors, our homegrown educators, utilizing what we've learned since time immemorial. Also to have healthy or promoting healthy living, being able to exercise your mind, exercise your body. That's a critical component to Hajon and balance. And also caring for those around us and caring for our land. A lot of counseling programs that were mentioned. If you are having a difficult time with anything, reach out to someone. There's a number that was given. Doesn't have to be about human trafficking. Could be just someone that needs to get something off their chests. That's one way of getting back into balance. My relatives, my friends out there that are listening. So thank you so much for the human trafficking prevention and awareness webinar today. Good. We congratulate you. Happy New Year. And I'll turn the time over to our Vice President now, and who has been leading us and walking the talk in terms of a healthy relationship as well with his family and modeling that for others to see. And I appreciate that. Appreciate that with the Vice President and our Second Lady and his children. God bless you. God bless our great Navajo Nation. Vice President.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. President, and all those on the call. Firstly and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody that contributed to this. I think First and Second Lady, Phefelia and Dottie. President and I are led in our homes. We lead in our homes with our spouses very well, and we look to them for a lot of information and a lot of guidance and a lot of thought and prayer. So I think our two families kind of steer the nation in a lot of ways, spiritually, leaders, and modeling that family dynamic. And so it shouldn't be minimized, nor should it be overlooked. But I'm appreciative of our president and First Lady Phefelia for the leadership that they've given the Navajo Nation. And myself as the vice president and my wife, the Second Lady Dottie, we look to their leadership, and we hold on to their coattails in many ways. And they model and are exemplary leaders for the great Navajo Nation. And so we just follow accordingly. And we provide with them, the leadership of the nation in the executive branch, many dynamics and many initiatives and projects. This one is no different. The human trafficking webinar that they've pulled together here, along with the help of many. I want to appreciate all those who spoke earlier. Thank you, Dr. Fowler. She's a great leader in her own right, and being the MC of this, providing remarks and prayer. We appreciate her leadership as well. Also, First and Second Lady, God bless you for doing this great thing. All those that collaborated and presented here as well, we're very appreciative of their contributions. Dr. Sandra Morgan, thank you. Our own vice president, I still call him vice president. So once you're a vice president, always a vice president. Rex Lee Jim, I appreciate it. Taisha Wood, thank you for your presentation. Michael Henderson, Elarina Nakai, Dr. Michelle Branzer, appreciate all of your presentation. Jeremiah Barber, I appreciate your presentation as well. To Jana Pfeiffer, appreciate it. It was great. Dr. Dominique Rose Sepowitz, appreciate you. And Officer Dottie, thank you for your contributions. And of course, our president, thank you for your exemplary leadership, sir. This is a great event. We look forward to hosting many more of these and collaborating and contributing to these as well from the Office of the President and Vice President, the executive branch here on Navajo. So I am the Vice President. Comanche Nishle, Tol Hana Basistin, Do Comanche Dashache, Clash Chila Chanela. It's good to be with you all. In the closing remarks of this great event, and also a closing prayer, benediction. So I don't count these opportunities lightly. It's very great to be collaborating with all, and we all bring different experiences and knowledge to an endeavor like this here, and ultimately to bless the Navajo Nation, our people, Shinanam. All of you that are watching, and many more that will view this here in the soon coming future. For this is a vital topic that needs to be elevated at any and all opportunities. And we also need to be appreciative too. This is a time, day, and age that's very critical. We're at a critical juncture spiritually, leadership, politically, and many facets of what comprises our great nation here, the United States of America. We are a ward of the federal government, and constant over the decades we've advocated and reminded our federal families of their trust responsibilities and this treaty that we signed and their federal obligation. So it was said early on, something I really believe, coming from the private sector. It was maybe first year was a lot of getting our feet wet, and Dottie and I, she went with me to Washington D.C. when President Trump signed the executive order on November 25th of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women executive order that set forth the Operation Lady Justice. The first president to do so on this topic. And so, again, being appreciative and thankful that it was elevated to the highest levels. It is up to us to continue to advance these ground that's taken, and hopefully save many more families from suffer and needless exposure to this missing and murdered. Just the sound of that is very threatening. And we need to take it as that, we could save many lives, just like in this pandemic, because of the actions or the advocacy of leaders, we can save many lives, and as we did in this pandemic. But again, we go forth with much power, with much vigor, and opportunities like this to be able to learn from those that have firsthand knowledge and experience is golden. It's golden. So treat it as such. Every word you've heard here, hang on to it and think about it and contemplate it. And most importantly, pray. Pray about what you've heard, and pray that this calamity does not come near your household, your tent. So, as you know, tend to become a little spiritual in regards to this. And it's our prayer that you and your family do not have to participate in this. Nobody wants to participate in this. So again, we're appreciative. Thank you to the Trump administration for being a champion for Native American communities across the United States. His recognition of this crisis will no longer go unnoticed. And again, it is all up to us to continue to advocate and to continue to change policy, to enhance policy and the laws of the land, and to use our federal family and congressional delegation to bring about the needed change to save family hardship and just the sadness of having to go through this. Nobody wants to go through what some other families have gone through. The families and communities of the loved ones of missing and murdered Indigenous women have waited far too long for justice. We hope that we can begin working to ensure Native American women will no longer face any violence that can go uninvestigated or unsolved. Again, continue to be advocates to elevate this subject matter, and to continue to be useful and be active in fighting against it. Just your words alone, just your being participatory in a walk or some kind of event that elevates and talks about the subject matter. No longer do we need to say somebody else will do it. The committee of someone else is made up of a bunch of people that we don't know. And the only way to ensure a future of fighting against this dreadful thing is that we participate. No longer do we leave it to the committee of they or somebody else will. It's up to us, every one of us. And so, as I referenced earlier, on November 26th of last year there in DC, those stats that were presented during the executive signing have shown that the cases of those involved involving missing and murdered Native women was very sobering and very heartbreaking. It was there that the press that was in the Oval Office had the chance and the ability to ask a question and to and continue to enlighten or to seek knowledge and information and ask about the subject matter, but they did not take the time. There was a pressing other thing that they thought was more important. And so I remember sharing with President that we lost a great opportunity to talk about the subject matter at hand, and we lost it, never to be taken up again unless we choose to push forth in that. He looked at me and he said, they never do. Again, it's up to us. The committee of they or somebody else will. We must take it upon ourselves and the leaders that are all on this here to advocate to the highest levels and to help bring about the change that we wish to see. So again, we're appreciative. There has been money that the United States Department of Justice has invested up to $1.5 million to hire specialized coordinators in 11 United States attorneys' offices across the United States. Calls for education and outreach campaigns for affected communities, public awareness in partnership with NAMUS, NAMUS, a missing person database, and better use of existing criminal databases. And that's where the collaborative effort comes in. We need to have all communication at our beck and disposal. We need to have all communication heightened and elevated to the highest levels, for we wish no data, no information to go, and for no case, no cold case, and much more to go unsolved. Justice must be served. We've seen the opening of 6 cold case offices across the country, even as far as up to the 48th state, Alaska, a cold case office up there. There are regional, have been 12 regional consultations hosted, numerous listening sessions to ensure the work of the task force, and it's shaped by the voices and experiences of the Native American community. We have Senate 227, or better known as Savannah's Act, and Senate 982, the Not Invisible Act, was signed into U.S. law. Savannah's Act, Public Law number 116-165, was signed on 10/10 of 2020, October 10th. It provides training to law enforcement agencies on how to record tribal enrollment for victims in federal databases, to develop and implement a strategy to educate the public on the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. It also led to conduct specific outreach to tribes, tribal organizations, and urban Indian organizations regarding the ability to publicly enter information through the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System or other non-law enforcement sensitive portals. It also developed regionally appropriate guidelines for response to cases of missing and murdered Native Americans. Provide training and technical assistance to tribes and law enforcement agencies for implementation of the developed guidelines, and report statistics on missing and murdered Native Americans. The Not Invisible Act, which was Public Law number 116-166, this bill increased the coordination of efforts to reduce violent crime within Indian lands and against Indians. Specifically, the Department of the Interior must designate an official within the Bureau of Indian Affairs to coordinate prevention efforts, grants, and programs related to missing Indians and the murder and human trafficking of Indians. In addition, Interior and the Department of Justice must number one, establish a joint commission on violent crime within Indian lands and against Indians, and 2, submit a written response to the recommendations developed by Joint Commission. This Joint Commission must develop and make publicly available recommendations to the Interior and DOJ on actions to combat violent crime against Indians and within Indian lands, including recommendations for identifying, reporting, and responding to instances of missing persons, murder, and human trafficking. So again, we're thankful that President Trump informed the public on October 10th, 2020, and that the DOJ announced $295.8 million in grants to tribal government across the country to bring about change here. And We're also thankful that the President launched the Presidential Task Force on Protecting Native American Children in the Indian Health System, which recently released a report examining systemic problems and solutions in the Indian health system that resulted in failures to protect children. There's a lot of accomplishment, but we're not done yet. We're not done. We will continue to combat against assault, rape, and murder that threatens and damages our Native American grandmothers, our mothers, our aunts, our cousins, our nieces, and our granddaughters. We need you. They need you. Let's join the fight against human trafficking. All of us are stronger than one of us. So we love you and we support you because we care. And as Liza cares, we'll continue to advocate at the highest levels. So again, we appreciate President Jonathan Nez and Phefelia, the First Lady of the Navajo Nation, and my wife, Dottie, the Second Lady. And we'll continue to advocate along with our other leaders of our great Navajo Nation because we wish to bring an enhanced quality of life to all those that are within our realm and authority to protect. And may it be God that helps us do this. We'll continue to work like it depends on us, but we'll pray like it depends on our Creator God, Shadian God. Yeah. So without further ado, let us close in prayer. Again, we're thankful for all those that contributed to this great work, this initiative, this event on webinar and virtually. This is the new way of doing things. And in a lot of ways, it's a great way. We need to elevate the subject matter. And that's how we turn these kinds of events into something grand, something life-changing, even in a pandemic. I've often talked about the crucible of this pandemic. What will you take away from it? What will you do? Let's become better for it. So, Ahya, Dian God, Boholnihi God, Yahweh, Creator, the Lord of heaven and earth, the Maker and Creator of heaven and earth. God, you are known by many names. And so we come to you humbly, seeking your guidance, seeking your knowledge, seeking the unity in the frame of our minds, Lord Father, as we collaborate, Lord. May we be unified in you, where love, mercy, and grace, those things will last forever, Lord. All the rest is hay, wood, and stubble. It'll dry up. Father, let us care and let us pray about the eternal things, Lord. Those things you bring to us, those things that you bless us with, Lord. The substance in which we go forward with, Lord. Let us care about the eternal aspect, Father. And so we pray for those, Lord, that are impacted by missing and murdered Indigenous women, Lord. Even your word says to pray for our enemies, Lord. We pray for those that have inflicted this great pain and agony and despair upon our people, Lord, over the decades, Lord. We pray, Lord, as you are the God, you're a just God, you're a righteous God. Let us pray that you bring your justice, Lord, to our land and to our time here on earth, Father. May we be found righteous in you, Lord. You set the ways, you set the parameters in which we go and be blessed, Father. And may we all be found obedient, Lord. And may we all seek you, Father, while you may be found. So we thank you, Lord, that the minds that have contributed to this time, Lord, let us all be the richer for it. Let us all be the wiser for it. And let us use this knowledge and data and information, Lord, Father, to make great decisions, Lord, to bring about an enhanced quality of life for our people all across this land that you've given us. So, Lord, we thank you. We again ask for your protection all across the land, Lord, and healing, Lord, for the land. We thank you, God, that you give us the spirit, Lord, of humility, Lord, and also the spirit of unity, Father, which we know we can be stronger, Lord, Father. With you, all things are possible. And with you, Jesus Christ, Lord, we can do all. To fill us now as we go forth. May we bless others, Lord, by activating ourselves, Lord, by praying, Lord, Father, by working to endeavor to bring justice to this land. We must bring you into this time, Father. So we thank you again. Bless all those, Lord, President, First Lady, and Second Lady, and all those that presented here today. May they be the richer for it. So protect them in their coming and going, Lord, until we meet again. Lord, we thank you again. In Jesus' name, we pray. Amen. So God bless you. Dr. Fowler, I will let you close if there's any last remarks that you wish to give to our people all across the land. Thank you for your leadership. Yes, God bless.
Thank you to all of the presenters. I appreciate this. And most importantly, thank you to our First Lady, Shema, Second Lady, Shacha. Ashi ini yinito nan ande hutawas aiba hien sandohon sagashi ahil net do. Again, thank you all. I appreciate all the resources, and Miss Sonia will go ahead and share those with us. And I think this is not it. We need more tutorial information. We need to share more resources. Again, it's time that we come together, and by getting involved and fighting against the human trafficking, let's all get involved. Let's continue to share resources. Thank you, and we will end this webinar at this time. Thank you, appreciate you. Have a blessed day, evening, week. Enjoy the snow here in Window Rock. Thank you.